Good afternoon. I would like to call to order the May 8th, 2023 Lake Washington School Board meeting. Let the record reflect that 4 board members are present and the 5th will be joining us shortly. The board values public participation and engagement in the meetings of the board. Board meetings will continue to be live streamed on the Lake Washington School District website. The board will now meet in executive session for 1 hour. The purpose of tonight's executive session is to review the performance to discuss potential litigation. Immediately following the executive session, the board will meet at 5 p.m. for tonight's study session. The meeting will stay in recess during study session and reconvene this evening at 7 p.m. The board will now enter executive session at 4:05. Thank you.
All right. Good evening. I would like to call to order the May 8th, 2023 Lake Washington School Board meeting. Please let the record reflect that all board members are present and both of our student reps are excused for the evening. The board values public participation and engagement in the meetings of the boards, and the meetings will continue to be live streamed on the Lake Washington School District website. So our first item of business this evening is a land acknowledgement, and Director Choi, she will read that for us.
The Board of Directors of Lake Washington School District acknowledges that our district is on the indigenous land of the Coast Salish peoples, who have reserved treaty rights on this land, including including the Duwamish and the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived here since time immemorial. We commit to continue collaborating with our Native community to teach the indigenous history of this land and these local tribes to all children of the district. We also commit to provide the best possible education for all children of Native descent who attend our schools.
Thank you. So I will now entertain a motion to approve the May 8th, 2023 agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
Been moved by Director LaLiberty and seconded by Director Carlson to approve the agenda. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. So our next item this evening is a proclamation declaring May 10th, 2023 as National School Nurse Day. I will ask Director LaLiberty to read the proclamation.
Thank you, Director Bleasner. I'm hearing audio feedback coming from. It should be fixed. Okay, excellent. Whereas children today face more complex and life-threatening health problems requiring care in school, and whereas all students have the right to have their health needs safely met while in the school setting, and whereas school nurses understand the link between health and learning and are in a position to make a positive difference for children every day, and whereas school nurses have served a critical role in improving public health and in ensuring student academic success for more than 100 years, and whereas school nurses are professional nurses who advance the well-being, academic success, and lifelong achievements of all students by serving on the front lines and providing a critical safety net for our nation's most fragile children. Therefore, we, the members of the Lake Washington School District Board of Directors, do hereby proclaim this coming Wednesday, May 10, 2023, as School Nurse Day in Lake Washington School District. Thank you, Director Bleasner.
All right, thank you, Director LaLiberty. So our next item on the agenda is public comment. As most of you are aware, the board does dedicate 30 minutes to hear from the public during a public comment period. Members of the public can sign up to participate in public comments on the district website at lwsd.org/board/public comments. Sign up does close at noon on the day of the board meeting, and comments will be offered in the order of sign up, beginning with speakers in person and followed by virtual, and concluding with written comments as time allows. With that, please note that we do ask you to limit your comments to 3 minutes. We do have quite a few individuals signed up this evening to speak. It is unlikely we will be able to get through all of those within those 30 minutes. But I will ask, if you are not able to speak tonight, please feel free to email your comments to boardmembers.org, boardmembers@lwsd.org, and they can also then be included through that fashion. With that, you will see the timer over here. It gives you 3 minutes. Green is when you're starting. Yellow, you have 1 minute left. Red, I will ask you to just wrap up at that point in time. I know many of you are very excited to be able to support the individual who is speaking. Please note that that does just slow down our process a little bit. We would like to just be able to move forward with those comments. So if we could limit applause, that would be greatly appreciated. Maybe at the very end of the 30 minutes, we can just do it for everybody who spoke. And with that, we will go ahead and start with our first person, Janny Wheelwright. We might get through this quicker than we thought. Okay, so our next person is Andrei Stasiuk. So the next person speaking after Andrei is Corey Deller, just so that you're aware.
Hello.
Good
dear
evening.
board. Good evening. Thank you for, again, giving me an opportunity to speak to you about the same subject of removal of Quest Science from middle school Quest. As I mentioned last time, we have conducted a survey between the Quest families on the subject, and over the past 2 weeks we got some more responses, but the trend is overwhelmingly clear. Out of more than 250 families that responded, more than 93% support the status quo to keep the science program as it is. And last time I presented a few quotes, mostly from parents, about the subject, but I wanted to focus on students this time and share some of their thoughts. And again, I'll share the full report with all quotes shortly in the next few days, but here are a few quotes from them. When asked why they want to keep the program as it is, they said, because Quest Science has smaller, more individualized groups and classes. To discuss the subject deeply and more in depth with my classmates, Quest Science is the easiest Quest class, so it makes no sense to make it even easier. It makes no sense that science should be removed from Quest because it is a core subject. Some of them questioned motivation after that change, if it were to be implemented. They said it would put me in a much slower paced and much more boring curriculum. They said the kids who are capable of doing the extra learning are not given an opportunity to show their skill and their ability. Some of them were worried about the future, just as the parents did. We should not remove it from such Quest kids. It's bad for the kids in Lake Washington School District and overall USA because science programs directly drive USA in more innovation. Grammar is, as it was in the responses. They also questioned the value of integration. Some of them said, I'm a student and school dynamics will be extremely affected due to the high tensions between Gen Ed students and students in the Quest, and will not play out well for both parties in those merged classes. The logic for making this decision is extremely unfair. They believe, the board and the accelerated programs officers, that Quest students do not have social skills and the ability to connect with others, which is not true because Quest is much more tightly bound and closer groups of people than Gen Ed students. Some of them mentioned not very friendly situations. I'm a Quest student and have endured a lot of bullying about how I'm a nerd and how Quest students aren't really smart at all. I don't want Gen Ed kids to find another way to torment us about how stupid we really are. And plus, I have a close gang of friends in Quest who I don't want to be separated from. And again, a lot of students and parents mentioned that it makes no sense to integrate people, especially from the west side, in Kamaiken when they have to be separated yet again when they start high school, just because it's of the district boundaries. So again, we'll share the report with all the opinions, but we wanted to let you know that we, the families, wanted to reconsider the decision. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you. So our next individual signed up is Corey Deller. Oh, and here you come. Excellent. And after Corey is Patricia Anders.
Hello, my name is Corey Deller. I'm a parent and active member of the PTSA at Blackwell Elementary School. I'm here to speak against the cutting of health room staff hours and to express my disappointment in the changes in the Safety Net program. As a parent of 2 children who utilize the Safety Net program, I want to convey firsthand that it really works. As I understand it, the district plans to reduce Safety Net staffing and replace it with instructional coaches to help regular classroom teachers deal with the needs of their students. Is this correct? I'm not entirely sure because none of my emails that I sent to the board about the topic has ever been replied to. That's disheartening to me because you encourage us to reach out and ask the questions, or we're asking, but you're not answering them. So I have to assume that our teachers now, who are already burnt out, who are already terribly difficult to replace, are being asked to do what they did way back when, which is everything. This is exactly why programs like Safety Net were created in the first place, because there was a screaming need for additional help like Safety Net because of our regular teachers couldn't balance the demands that were placed upon them. So please don't put that stress back on the teachers. It's only going to hurt the students. We know this. So LWSD has strategic goals listed on your website. There's 5. The first is to ensure academic success. By reducing one-on-one time with trained Safety Net staff members, how is that successful? The second is to provide safe and innovative learning. Reducing programs doesn't seem very innovative. It sounds a little bit lazy. Recruit, hire, and retain highly effective personnel is the third one. Blackwell already has that highly effective personnel, so why reduce them? Use resources effectively is the fourth one. Overloading teachers' plates doesn't seem effective. It sounds like a recipe for disaster. And the fifth one is engage your community. You've engaged us. We're here, and we're letting you know that we don't approve. Cutting health room hours. This one really hits home for me personally because I'm a healthcare worker myself. Anybody can slap a Band-Aid on a knee. That's a bit how the health room staff job has always been viewed. But imagine being a crying kid, maybe bleeding, and having that Band-Aid slapped on by somebody who doesn't care, slapped on by somebody who doesn't really want to play nurse. Health room staff hours were cut last year. Now you want to cut them again. So who exactly is supposed to be caring for the kids during these empty hours? Again, my email to the board asking these details wasn't replied to. So I'm left to assume you expect any random person in the office to do that. I spoke to the office staff and they have zero interest in taking on those responsibilities. It was part of their job way back in the day and it failed to be successful. Health room staff were hired for a reason. They like doing it and they're great at it. So let's look back at those goals. Cutting health room hours doesn't really ensure success. It definitely doesn't provide a safer environment. It pushes effective personnel away. It pushes effective personnel away rather than retaining them. And it doesn't utilize resources effectively when an office manager who might be great with numbers but terrible with compassion is left to care for crying kids. And lastly, it does engage the community because, again, we're here and we're letting you know that we don't like it. In conclusion, I don't envy you guys. I mean, budget cuts are necessary to maintain fiscal responsibility. What I'm asking you to do is reassess where you're cutting. Trimming the fat from people who already make low salaries impacts them much more than trimming fat off larger incomes, say like $150,000 principals or superintendents that make an awful lot. So if you're looking to save money next year, there are places to find it that won't so negatively impact the kids or the pivotal daily school staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Patricia?
Hi.
And so the next person I have signed up is Sakina Rizvi.
Hi, my name is Trisha Anders. I'm the nurse at Lake Washington High School, serving approximately 1,900 students from various family backgrounds and cultures, including students that are homeless, refugees, immigrants, and may be under or uninsured. I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but the building nurse does not sit in the health room during the day. Our role and job responsibilities are not an equal exchange for the health room office professional. In addition to attending every student or staff emergency in our building, we also perform critical state-mandated reporting which impacts district funding. We also manage individual health plans for students with chronic health conditions and participate in 504 and IEP planning, alongside individual and group meetings with parents. The school nurse is responsible to ensure that staff are trained on using emergency medications, not just for field trips, but also in classrooms that have students with high medical needs and require high-risk emergency drugs. The school nurse is also responsible for ensuring that all district students are in compliance with Washington state legal requirements for emergency medications and immunizations. School nurses run the vision and hearing screenings across the district over the first half of the year. We're also required to assist other buildings with direct student care needs, as one nurse often can't handle the acuity of their caseload alone. Because of this, we are not always able to be present in our buildings. Most district nurses cover multiple buildings and rely heavily on the health room office to report and assist with urgent health needs. The health room office professional can have 4 to 5 students waiting to be seen at any given time. It is critical that all of these students have direct access to someone who is knowledgeable about their specific health concerns to avoid dangerous medication errors and delayed responses to their medical needs. The health room is often the first stop for students experiencing mental health crises, where the health room person can quickly notify the nurse anytime a student needs higher level of help. I have several students who are alive today because the health room was a safe place for them to come and get the help they needed. Last year, I began working with a student during the height of mental health crisis exacerbated by alcohol and drug use. This student was sent to the health room by a teacher because they threatened self-harm to themselves and others. The health room professional stayed with them until medics arrived. This student does not have traditional family support, but the health room was allowed for them to have a consistent continuity of care. It is so vital to their health and safety that it is actually part of their 504 plan to have access to the health room. The student has reported they feel much more safe and supported and better able to attend school. Currently, our health room is still not open the entire school day, yet we continue to have students waiting to be seen before and after the limited health care hours. Reducing student access even more does not meet the health and safety needs of students in our district, and I implore you to reconsider reducing the hours of the health room office professionals who provide direct student care.
Thank you. The next person we have is Sakina Rizvi, and on deck is Marlene Vaknitz.
Greetings, respected LWC board members, or should I say, Assalamu alaikum, which translates to peace be upon you. My name is Sakina Rizvi, and I'm a Muslim student attending Redmond High School. I'm asking for a day off for Eid on behalf of the 284,000 Muslims in Washington State, and those of which who attend school in Lake Washington School District. Eid is a celebration for over 2 billion Muslims worldwide. The reason why I don't say holiday is because we don't actually get the day off, and our schoolwork becomes an obstacle to enjoying festivities after Ramadan. For those who are not aware what Eid is, it's a big Muslim celebration consisting of special prayers and events with family, marking the end of Ramadan, a month of fasting from sunrise to sunset. For example, let's think about it like this. 2.4 billion Christian friends and neighbors celebrate Christmas every year, and they get that day off to fully participate in their cultural festival without having to choose between school attendance and religious observance. I believe the Muslim community deserves a day off for religious observance that means so much to them. Just imagine the joy of Muslim children, especially those in elementary school, when they realize they have the day off. They'll get to unite with their community and special morning prayers. They'll get to attend the Eid bazaars, eat yummy food, celebrate after a month of fasting. Me personally, I cherish my Eid memories so much, and now it doesn't exactly feel the same. That's because back then, I didn't have homework to complete at the end of the day or study for a test I had to make up later that week. It takes away from my experience as a Muslim, and I want my community to be able to celebrate our religion to the fullest. Us students want to be able to freely go to the mosque and pray, be with our family and enjoy the day, and then return to school the next day knowing we didn't miss any tests or any exams or any homework. Other districts in other states have already done it. New Jersey, Michigan, New York, Ohio, Minnesota, and Texas. Public schools in these states have recognized that Eid as important to Muslims as Christians to Christmas. So what's holding us back? What's holding us back? Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you considering making Eid a day Muslims in our community can truly enjoy. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you. And Marlene Vaknitz, you're walking up, all right? And on deck is Tara Mosier.
Good evening, members of the school board. My name is Marlene Vachniks, and I'm the office manager at Redmond Middle School. I'm here to ask you to not reduce the work hours for health room office professionals. Our health rooms are busy, and for students, a very vital part of our school. Our Redmond Middle School health room office professional, Nikki, is busy from the time she comes in to the time she leaves. What does a professional do? They provide daily prescription medicine to students when needed. They establish relationships with students experiencing mental health concerns. They give transgender students a private space for a restroom and a welcoming person to go to for their needs. They help provide support and assistance when a school 911 call is made, and that's made more often than you think. They work with counselors to provide student health support. They provide snacks for students that do not eat breakfast. They provide feminine products for students and a place for privacy. They supply ice packs. They check to make sure students have immunizations. They check paperwork for field trips. They organize sport meds to make them available for their coaches. They maintain logs of current emergency meds and expiration days. They're involved with vision and hearing data and follow-up letters. They make sure health room is clean and stocked with supplies. They enter all the visits in the health room into Skyward, and they adhere to make sure Lake Washington policies, procedures, and protocols are always followed. Health room office professionals do a lot. Each of the items I mentioned takes time to do, and the students are usually in a health room for at least 15 minutes for observation. Our health room on our busiest day had 90 students that went through. One day we had 4 students in the health room and 5 students in the adjacent counseling office. We have had 99 head injuries that have come into our health room so far this year. After an injury and a student visit, the health room professional is required to call home, send a letter home, email parents of a head bump notification, and if serious with blood, write up an incident report online. By cutting health room hours, it means the rest of the office staff that's already spread thin is asked to cover more health room time for student visits and injuries. Nikki, our amazing health room office professional, is not sure she can survive if her hours are reduced. It would be a shame to lose such an awesome employee due to a cut in hours. Please understand the importance of providing dedicated frontline student services and do not cut hours in the health room, please. Thank you.
The next person after Tara is Lydia Wheeler.
Good evening, school board members. My name is Tara Mosier. I am the health room office professional at Redmond High School. I'm here today to explain the nature of what I do and the importance of the ATROP position for all students at the school in our district. If I move it, the echo is driving me nuts. Yeah. Okay. Is this better? Out of respect for your time, I will keep this short, but please know that what I am about to explain to you is not even the bare minimum of what I do on a daily basis. I care for at least 18 to 40 students every day. Student needs range from emotional to first aid, illnesses, medication administration, life-threatening situations, and so much more. When students are sick or in an emotional crisis in the classroom, teachers are able to send them to the health room to be triaged without any significant interruption in their instruction. Additionally, many of our LWSD schools do not have a full-time nurse available on campus during the school day, so the health room office professionals are the closest people trained to assist with emergencies and manage emergency medications. Health room visits are not limited to 5 hours a day. There have been many times I have been needed before school starts and even after students are released from school. Recently, a student stayed after school with a teacher for testing and began having an anaphylactic reaction and after accidentally eating their own allergen. Unfortunately, the school nurse was off campus and not available at that time. Luckily, I was there and able to quickly locate the student's EpiPen and administer their life-saving medication before the medics had even arrived. That is only one example of many student concerns that occur before and after hours outside the proposed 5-hour window. As you know, there's been a significant mental health crisis among teens since the onset of COVID pandemic. It is not unusual for me to be the first person that a teen in crisis interacts with. When I identify a student who is having a panic attack or experiencing suicidal ideation, I have to stay with them to ensure their safety until they can be seen by the appropriate mental health professional. Because LWSD does not have a formal suicide prevention procedure/protocol in place, it can take a while to identify who is the correct person to address their needs. These kinds of crises don't only happen during a limited 5-hour period. They happen throughout the school day at unpredictable times. I hope this helps to begin to explain the importance of this position for the direct care of over 2,200 RHS students, as well as the direct impact on our teachers and school community. I invite any one of you to spend a day with me in the health room and observe the importance of what we do and why it is a much needed full day position for safety and support of our students and staff. You will get a better understanding of what a negative impact it will be to cut the availability of the health room professional role from our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Lydia Wheeler. And on deck is Taha Shafakat.
I'll try and do my fiddling first. Hello, I'm Lydia Wheeler. I am the elected president of Lake Washington Educational Support Professionals, a unit of more than 300 office professionals and nurses who work in the district and play vital roles serving our students and schools every day. I'm here today with members of LWESP, including those you've heard from, to address the proposal to reduce health room office professional hours in our schools, included in resolution number 2348. The resolution lists a reduction of 1 hour per day per school campus in 2023-24. However, the need for health room staffing in LWSD has not decreased since the end of the pandemic. LWSD students need health room office professionals in their building. Students use our health rooms constantly. They made more than 77,000 recorded visits to school health rooms in the last year for everything from playground falls to serious illnesses. Students visit health rooms for too many reasons to count, and whether they visit looking for physical, mental, or emotional support, health room staff can serve as a frontline contact to help them get the care they need to stay in school. While we know enrollment has declined since the pandemic, lower student numbers do not necessarily mean reduced need for school office staffing, and that's especially true in our health rooms. Even with COVID waning, we certainly know that downstream effects of COVID have seen staffing needs for health rooms stay the same or increase since the years of our highest enrollment before the pandemic hit. Additionally, it's not uncommon for that special relationship that health room OPs have with our families for health room OPs to learn of medical conditions that weren't disclosed at the start of the school year in conversation and relationship building with families. Without one dedicated staff member supporting care of students at each school, LWSD will have fewer opportunities for communication that bridges the gap between student needs and school resources. Finally, if health room office professional hours are reduced, front office staff in our schools will be pulled in yet another direction, this time one that affects medical care provided to students. It is demanding, time-consuming work and necessitates taking pains. Adding the scope of work to the already full plates of school office professionals could all too easily result in less bandwidth to respond to parent and community inquiries on both sides of the house, leaving students and parents looking for the level of care and connection that they enjoyed last year. We need supports in place in our buildings that our community can count on to keep our schools healthy and safe so students can access the public education that is their right. Even one student who might have been able to connect with the resource they needed, who instead encounters a closed door, is one student too many, but that's the reality our students will face if this cut goes through. We're asking the Lake Washington School District and our school board to pull Resolution 2348 or revise it to remove the health room office professional hour cuts. On behalf of Lake Washington Educational Support Professionals, I ask the superintendent, the school district, and our school board to prioritize student safety and supports by retaining health room office professional hours in the 2023-24 school year. And I am also here to provide Dr. Holman with our petition, signed by over 1,000 unit employees and supporters of LWESP. Dr. Holman, I'll ask that you share copies with the board to show the full scope of support of our members, colleagues, teachers, paras, and parents. Please reverse this riff and keep student supports whole. Thank you.
All right, welcome. And the next individual is Cindy Knapp. Oh, no, you're up. I'm sorry. You're first.
Good. All right, my bad.
I apologize. My mistake. I was trying to get him on deck.
Dear members of the school board and fellow community members, with great pleasure as well as urgency, I stand in front of you today to address a crucial and important matter. I think we all agree that respecting religious cultural practices of all people at the Lake Washington School District is something that we all try our best to do. Ramadan is a 30 days of fasting for the Muslim community, and at the end we have a celebration called Eid. In a statement by the Lake Washington School District Board of Directors, it says, quote, "We, the Lake Washington School District Board of Directors, proclaim Lake Washington's ongoing commitment to ensure an equitable and inclusive environments that emphasize a core value of mutual human respect for all people, regardless of individual differences or characteristics." Dear members of the board, in order to ensure that, we have to make Eid a recognized holiday so that Muslim students and staff can celebrate without any consequences. This holiday is very significant, and there's a growing amount of Muslim students entering this district every year, and I've seen it with my own eyes. In a study from Pew Research Center, from 2011 to 2017, the Muslim population of the United States as a whole has increased by 46.8%. And that number is expected to increase by another about 50% by 2050. That is in the millions, the high millions, almost 10 million Muslims in the United States. And many school districts and cities across the country have seen this, and they have made the change to make Eid a recognized holidays. Places like New York, New Jersey, Minneapolis, and Detroit have made this change. So I ask you, why can't we? Even San Francisco, a tech hub just like us, with many Muslims just like us, has moved their spring break to make Eid included in it. So I ask you, why can't we do that? One way we can do that is we can make Eid a leap day. And I think that's a great idea. This holiday is not only very religiously and significant in a celebration, but it's also a break. And I'd like to paint a picture of what it's like, of how tired we are at the end of Ramadan and why we need a break. I'd like you guys to imagine yourself waking up early in the morning on 2 hours of sleep with dry skin, chapped lips, and your eyes are half open and dry. And each time and every day you walk around school, your knees ache. And every step you take, you hurt more and more, and you're more and more tired, and it hurts. And then you get the news that you have a test tomorrow on Eid. Now, if you skip it with your parent policy, which I applaud you that you give us an excused absence, it's time to take the next step, because it hurts that we have to do all that makeup. And I know many students who choose not to, and they miss out on their beloved holiday, and they miss out on respected and needed rest that is necessary. And I think you can all agree that you would need a day off free of consequences if you woke up with aching knees and aching joints. So please, members of the board, I really encourage you to listen to my message. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. All right, so thank you. This must be Cindy Knapp coming forward, and on deck is Sarah Chesterfield. Thank you.
Thank you. Like I said, my name is Sydney Knapp. I am a former teacher and a mother to 3 children in the district. My son, Kuba, was one of the first students in the Rockwell Inclusion Pilot and is now in 3rd grade. In addition to being nonverbal, he has significant developmental and cognitive delays, which put him in the 1st percentile across the board in his evaluation as he transitioned into the school system. Because of these numbers, I had initially assumed that Kuba could never be part of a general education classroom. Before having kids, my biggest fear was actually having a child with special needs, specifically autism or a cognitive disability. Well, Kuba has both. And as I reflect on why I feared having a child like Kuba, I realized that my fear came from the fact that in all my 20-plus years of my own education and over 10 years teaching, I had never had any meaningful interactions with anyone with significant special needs. They were always tucked away in self-contained classrooms or learning centers, out of sight, teaching me and my fellow students by default to fear them because they were too different to be part of a regular classroom. My son is a delight. I did not want others to fear him, and so as he entered kindergarten, I pushed for inclusion. This was the best decision I have ever made. In 4 short years, Kuba now has a community of friends who love and adore him and advocate for him. He is known, he is loved, and he is learning. Learning from his peers, interacting with them, watching them, being included in their play. His work looks different from his classmates, his day looks different, and that's okay. Thanks to Mr. Clark, Rockwell Elementary is a community where differences are embraced and celebrated rather than feared. This is not to say that this process has been perfect for us. It's been difficult. We've seen staff burnout and turnaround, but even inclusion done poorly still has more benefits than exclusion ever will. So as our district prepares to open 14 new elementary schools to inclusion, I am deeply concerned by the fact that so many parents, teachers, and principals are fighting it. The truth is that they are fighting it because they are scared. They are scared because they have not been given the opportunity to see what inclusion is. In my opinion, this fear is due to the district's lack of transparency and failure to comply with OE 9.1, assuring the timely flow of information, appropriate input, and strategic two-way communication between the district and its communities to build understanding and support for district efforts. Stakeholders should have been not only educated on the whys of inclusion, but also the how, and this should have started years ago, not weeks before the end of the school year. Moving forward, effective strategic two-way communication could look like holding more frequent town hall meetings for families in the affected schools to address concerns and allow others to share what's working and what's not. Sharing inclusion stories district-wide to help others understand what inclusion actually looks like, educating families about our demo schools like Twain Elementary, and getting the board of directors and program specialists into our schools, engaging with teachers and staff, training our MTSS coaches, assisting with writing quality IEPs that facilitate good inclusive practices.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up if you
Okay.
could. Thank you.
And my last one, in just meeting with teams to problem solve common issues such as scheduling, which is a big one, and problem solving and incorporating UDL into the classrooms. We have the tools, we have the resources, we just need to use them better. Thank you.
Thank you. So our last person speaking tonight will be Sarah Chesterfield. We have hit the 30 minutes, so we will finish up here.
Great. Good evening. My name is Sarah Chesterfield, and I'm a special education teacher in the district. I work at Rockwell Elementary School, where Sydney's son attends. I'm not really a crier, but one email from a parent made me sob. The email read, "I never thought my son would have friends." This student transferred to our school from a highly restricted environment where he was never allowed to be around his same age peers. The student's father responded to me sending a picture of him holding hands and walking around our playground with a peer. Inclusion has a lot of benefits. The why is very easy to see. The how is where we can get convoluted. I'm afraid that I have to agree with Cindy that the communication of the district's goals for inclusion have been unclear. The rollout for inclusion have been unclear. I myself had significant problems with the way that we've been staffed. I've had to spend a great deal of time asking over and over again for staffing that's appropriate for the safety and adaptive needs of the students at our school. when spreading resources around the district, allocations for funding and staffing need to be a priority. I want to make sure that we aren't just having students sit in the back of the room, but they're having meaningful educational experiences at their home schools. And to do this, we need adequate planning time. Students currently have structured learning programs in our learning centers across the district. To ensure that these are transferred over to more schools, more time is needed to ensure from day one the students are actively engaged in learning and not going through the motions of a piecemeal system. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, that does conclude our public comment. I know we were not able to get to everybody here. Please do email us those comments as a minimum. We are also going to take probably a 5-minute break. So if you would like to get up and leave, you are welcome to. You're more than welcome to stay for our meeting as well. As part of our agenda, we do have an inclusion update that is on the board agenda for the non-consent coming up, so that will be coming up. Oh, and he is reminding me of the next step, and I apologize. We did have additional of the in-person comments we were not able to get through. We had additional ones around inclusion and the work in the inclusive work. There was a question around Quest at Rosa Parks, another support for making Eid a religious holiday, and again, additional support around health room professionals. For virtual comments, we had another one with Eid, but also around the Sammamish River Valley School, school and learner vulnerabilities, as well as inclusion. In our written comments, you can see those online if you are interested. That is around our choir program, OE14 and Equity and Choice, in addition of Hindi language and also funding for school nurses, and then public trust was another one that was in there. So that's a quick summary of what was there. No, I'm sorry, we're not currently taking, we're going to take a break in just a second, and then we can have a conversation. Oh, I am so sorry. Thank you very much. Eid. And so with that, we will take a 5-minute break till 7:45.
Okay, there it is.
All right. So welcome back. Our next item on our agenda is the approval of the May 8th, 2023 consent agenda. I will now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move approval.
Been moved by Director La Liberty and seconded by Director Stewart to approve the consent agenda as presented. Dr. Holman, would you please poll the board?
Yes. Director La Liberty?
Yes.
Director Stewart?
Yep.
Director Carlson?
Yes.
Vice President Choi?
Yes.
And President Bleasner?
Yes. And Dr. Holman, will you please summarize the donations?
Yes. On the board's packet tonight, you have just under $20,000 of donations from our PTSA to our local schools. It's with great appreciation that we accept these donations to provide supports for our students and their programs.
All right, thank you. We do greatly support the community support in regards to helping provide all those additional activities and supports for our students. And with that, we're on to the non-consent agenda. So as I had mentioned during public comment, our first item on the evening tonight is an update about the inclusion efforts going on within our district. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Holman.
Thank you. And so a team is going to come tonight and do sort of a panel presentation to the board. We've had conversations around questions that the board has. A number of us attended the PTSA Special Education Group meeting where a number of questions from families were posed. From that, we agree with some of the comments that we want to make sure that we're engaging with and communicating with our community and highlighting really the excitement around what inclusive practices do for our schools and our communities. And so tonight, Deputy Superintendent Matt Gillingham is going to lead us through a panel discussion. The team you see in front of you, I'll actually let them each introduce themselves as part of the panel tonight. And so we haven't done this format before with the board, but we thought it would be a nice way to have multiple voices and perspectives from the central leadership team, just talking about inclusionary practices, some of the background information on why we're doing what we're doing, some of the what, some of the training aspects, and the like. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Matt.
All right, thank you, Dr. Holman. Let's get a little bit further away. Tonight is going to be a little bit different. We started working on kind of more of a traditional presentation, and really just felt that as we were talking through that the best way to kind of engage around the variety of work that has been going over multiple years is for you to hear from a number of different CL team members who are engaged in leading in very different ways as we think about MTSS and inclusion. And so we've crafted, got about 5 questions for the team that I'll facilitate. Then there'll be opportunities for the board, and I may ask some follow-up questions, but then there'll be some opportunities for the board to ask some follow-up questions at the end. And I'm going to first kind of start with all of the work that we've been doing engaged around MTSS and inclusion and equity really drives from the board's 3 results policies. Results 1 is that each student will graduate prepared to lead a rewarding, responsible life as a contributing member of our community and greater society. And much of what we're doing and thinking about, and you'll hear today about the importance of all students being able to access general education first, accessing core curriculum, being able to actually interact with all of their peers is an important part of that preparation. And so our panel is going to speak to that tonight. Each student's demonstrating a mastery of content knowledge, skills, and competencies, and thinking about the importance of accessing core curriculum for all of our students as the primary way in which we do that, and then the ways in which we provide interventions and supplemental supports to help students with that versus relying on those to supplant that access. And then thinking about our students' abilities to grow their critical social, emotional, and behavioral skills, and the importance of students being able to establish relationships, make decisions, and having productive, rewarding, responsible life as a contributing member of our community and greater society, and thinking about how we create inclusive classrooms and inclusive school environments as part of that. So hoping what you're going to hear today from the panel is how this work directly connects back to the results policies that the boards have established. This team here has been important in leading a lot of this work. They are representatives, and we have to acknowledge that there are countless classroom teachers, special educators, principals who are not part of this panel, and hopefully that we'll have additional opportunities in the future to continue to bring in other voices around that. So we have Dr. Shannon Hitch, who's our Executive Director of Special Services, Kelly Pease, our Director of Intervention Services, Stephanie Clark at the end, our Director of Elementary Education, Dr. Jen Rose, our Associate Superintendent, and Scott Beebe, our Deputy Superintendent. All right, so the first question that I have for this panel is wanting to start in the context of the general education classroom and thinking about how we've been supporting classroom teachers to meet the need of the wide variety of learners. And I'm actually going to start with Kelly on this one to talk about kind of that wide variety of learners in our classrooms.
Okay. Can you hear me okay this way? No? Closer? Okay. How about this? Better? Okay. So if we think about the classroom experience and you think of the 4-legged stool you see on your screen here, we like to consider the stool with the proper supports is the scaffold for every student all student learning, and that each leg of the chair, one constitutes the classroom environment, the teacher, the curriculum, and the student's peers. And the mitered crosshatches in the middle that keep the stool sturdy are the connections between families and the greater community. So as we think about the classroom and it being inclusive for all students, we know that our teachers work diligently to meet the needs of each student in the classroom, inclusive of multilingual students, students who are receiving special education services, as well as a variety of other learners in the classroom. So I think that to meet the wide variety of learners, we provide scaffolded supports for students, and we think about how do we equip our teachers with additional supports to meet the needs of each group of learners. For instance, if for our multilingual students, we think about implementation of the SciOut curriculum, which we provide system-wide training for teachers on a yearly basis. Thinking also about how do we ensure every kid, because every kid has a right to read, how do we ensure all of our teachers are equipped with the effective pedagogy to teach structured literacy to all students, and have the effort and the time and supports to build on-ramps for all of our students, because within their classrooms today they have the variety of learners, and we want to provide more support through the coaching model to help support our core instructors, generally classroom teachers, to support our students when in the space where they spend 6.5 hours a day.
Thinking about how that shows up in the classroom, how it shows up in Tier 1. I'm not sure if you guys...
We can hear you. I don't know if it's on. Is it on?
It is. You can hear it. Touching it. Get it closer.
There we go. So an example of embedding strong Tier 1 instruction, I'll pull through in talking about our implementation of illustrative mathematics last year and this year, that on a technical level, you still can't hear me? Try that one. Okay. Any better? There we go. Okay. On a technical level, so I was talking about how we are, as a system, working to really embed solid Tier 1 in and our support for inclusion for all students in the same thing. They're not different pieces. So a specific example of that is we adopted illustrative mathematics last year, and we did initial implementation last year, and we've been deepening it this year. And especially as we went into this year, we really thought about, as a system, designing the learning with ML specialists and our director of ML and our folks from intervention and folks from special ed, designing the professional learning that all of our K-5 teachers got, so that it was core, it was Tier 1 math, learning around their Tier 1 math curriculum, but it really was thinking about the instructional strategies that go with our core curriculum in a way that all students can access it. So that's been some of the thinking that we continue to do, is to think about how we can really focus on Tier 1 and have that be solid and expand to providing access points for all students. So that's a specific example in core, but there's more examples that I know Shannon can speak to as well.
Well, I think I would first say that there is a myth of the average learner. Our classrooms are not full of average learners. Our classrooms are full of individual children with a wide variety of strengths and backgrounds and skill sets and abilities that they come to us with. I think we have children who have experienced trauma, children in poverty, children who've been significantly impacted by COVID, kids who are highly capable, kids who are multilingual, kids with disabilities. And so teachers already have classrooms full of diversity and a wide variety of student strengths and student needs. And so really MTSS is how we provide the structures and supports across our entire system to ensure inclusivity for all of those varied learners.
And then I can just add, being in the elementary schools weekly, I have the pleasure of being in the elementary schools weekly, as teachers are working with their PLC teams, looking at data, and designing small group instruction that is just right for those groups of students. And then the interventionists, the special ed teachers, the ML teachers, the safety net teachers are strategically pushing in or pulling out students who need more. So in the classroom, when you go in, you see small groups, small group rotations, working with the specialists supporting those classroom teachers as they go.
I wonder if we could also talk a little bit, Stephanie, because many of the schools that you're supporting have the MTS coaches in them. and talking about the role of the MTSS coach and how that person is helping support the classroom teacher.
Sure. It looks a little different in every building that you go to, just because each coach has different experience. But our 7 elementary schools in the Lake Washington cohort, and I think 2 in Eastlake and Redmond, have an MTSS coach. The coach works strategically with principals, or not with principals, but with teachers in providing cycles of inquiry. At Lakeview, the MTSS coach is actively engaged in targeted areas where we know that there is a specific need based on data, or we are welcoming some students with some complex learning needs. So those coaches team up with those teams during planning time or during release time, Wednesday early release time, to provide some guided resources to help them collaborate and plan for their learning. So that is one way it's playing out in the classrooms.
I just want to add a little bit to that teaching is the most complex job I think there is, because you're dealing with human beings with thoughts and feelings and all sorts of complexity. And so asking teachers to sort of be metacognitive about the work that they're doing while they're doing it is very, very difficult, because I've got 25 little kids in front of me. So MTSS coaches also will model strategies for teachers with the kids in the classroom. They're resource gatherers, so they'll go out and look for specific resource or specific pedagogy to work with a specific need in the classroom that frees the teacher up a little bit to continue to focus on the instruction, but with the support from somebody, that second set of eyes that can sort of do that metacognition in the classroom. What we know about professional learning is, and it's substantiated in almost every piece of literature around professional learning, that job-embedded, just-in-time professional development is the most effective. So when we hold a 2-hour class somewhere down here and then we send a teacher off, okay, now go figure that out in your classroom, that is not a particularly successful model for professional learning. So part of the goal and part of what we're seeing in the 9 schools that had the MTSS coach now is that the professional learning is shifting to in the classroom with their kids. It's a much more effective model of professional learning than we're experiencing up to this point.
So my next question for the panel, we talked about how the supports for classroom teachers, and then, but we know that our principals are critical to leading MTSS at their schools and helping create inclusive environments in the school setting and the classroom setting. So I think, Stephanie, if you could kick us off and talk about what type of supports are being put in place to help our principals be able to systemically lead improvements with respect to MTSS and inclusion.
Well, not to one-up Scott, but the principal is probably the second most complex job there is out there. They are working hard and engaging in a lot of ways to improve learning for all students. And I'm going to get myself a little bit lost. There's the learning that we've done that's been really focused on the inclusion in the last few years. That's really, I mean, we can look back to the work that Craig Motz has done at Twain Elementary as a pilot school. And I have been fortunate enough to participate in some of his learning walks where elementary schools from all over the state come to see the work that's being done in that building. And one of the most, I think effective ways that our cohort 3 or our cohort 3 principals, ones that are just going to start next year, had an opportunity to attend sessions with every cohort 2 school. So they got to participate and visit Lake Washington schools and go on a learning walk and learn not what did the principal do to prepare staff, what did the principal do and the staff do to prepare for students, and what's the learning that they're engaging in right now, and what do they think is their next steps. Rose Hill Elementary would be one school that they visited, and I was just reviewing that visit recently with my notes, and they learned about all the things that Jen Hodges and her team did to prepare for students, but also learned about the 6 new students they welcomed in the cohort. She shared with them their learning schedules and their learning plans, along with providing them currently that those students are all in the general education classroom, which is the goal of inclusive work, 60 to 91% of the time. So it was very doable. And with that, after that even, she stated, there's still some things we need to improve on. We need to create better systems to collaborate. I need to think about my master's schedule to get my special ed team working more often with my general ed team and my ML team working more often with my general ed team. So in January or February, we provided some learning and engagement in master schedule development, which really created that system so all of those interventionists can work together. In addition, Lakeview Elementary principal and MTSS coaches provided tools and resources to help teachers and general ed teachers and special ed teachers and ML teachers work together with a variety of tools. Like if you have 5 minutes, 15 minutes, or 45 minutes, there's a time where we can connect and create some awesome learning for a child before they come into that classroom. So there's just different tools that are there. We're gearing up next week, or tomorrow, to really provide some instruction on how to work with the MTSS coach. You're going to have a coach in your building. How will you introduce them? What is that coaching going to look like? And how are you going to provide buy-in for the staff to do that? So there's been a lot of opportunities that the principals have engaged in. Reading the text, Leading for All. Shannon Hitch's team has a great OneNote that provides resources from UDL, resources for para-educators, but just a variety of rich resources from the TIEs, from Shelley Moore, that principals can use to engage their staff in learning and growing to improve outcomes for all students.
There's a couple other things we've done too. We've had principals and their building leadership teams working on the FIA assessment, and one of the resources Shannon and her team have provided is the LRE, Least Restrictive Environment Assessment, which helps sort of get a sense of where they are currently as a building, and then provide next steps for how they grow from wherever they are. Steph really touched on what a lot of the work next year will be around principal professional learning, how to successfully work with a coach. The role of a coach is different than the role of the principal. Principals are evaluators of staff, and so our ability, or my ability as a staff member to take risks with my principal is always sort of clouded with that. They're also evaluating my performance. That is not the role of a coach. The coach does not evaluate, and we're going to draw a pretty hard line between those two functions with intentionality around keeping that relationship between coach and teacher sort of sacred in the I can take risks with this person and really try on some new practices and be honest about what I know and don't know to support individual students. So I'm kind of excited about that work, honestly. The other piece that I wanted to touch on, we're sort of aligning systemically around this work. So we recognized early in the year, as Steph and Sandy are hardworking, dedicated to supporting principals, but they each had 15 of them to support. And so they were not able, just by virtue of the sheer number, to spend enough time or to allocate enough time to support individual principal growth in the way that I think they want to. They've done some work with the Center for Educational Leadership around one-on-one inquiry cycles with principals. And so that is one of the reasons that we sort of re-looked at our teaching and learning department and repurposed an FTE out of that to add that third elementary level director, because we know principal leadership is key in schools to the inclusion work. Somebody mentioned Michael Clark, one of the parents did. I actually used the story from the PTA event that a couple of us were at Juanita the other night, just to share the experiences that some of our kids are having. So that work will be ongoing, and that is the reason that we added that third level director, to provide an increased level of support for the principal leadership through this work as well.
Okay. I just in thinking about systems and structures and laying the foundation for successful inclusivity and giving principals opportunities to work collaboratively to build block schedules. So reading blocks and math blocks will occur at all the first grade will have reading at a specific time. So then students who receive additional supports can then have the support outside of core instruction or pushed in during small group instruction, so that the schedules, the foundation of a school day, which is their schedule, are built around inclusivity and getting students those additional supports that don't take them out of the general ed classroom.
There are a few board questions, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't want to hijack the.
Or would you like to keep going? How would you like to handle that?
Well, you could, if I'll handle it however you'd like us to handle that. We have questions. Maybe they'll be answered. Maybe they won't. So I will defer to you.
So we will try 2 questions at this point. Then we're going to stop and move on to their next question and see how that goes. So Director Liberty and Director Stewart, I believe, both are.
Okay, I'll try to make it brief. When I was in school, the differentiated instruction kind of meant segregated instruction, right? That's sort of the mental model that I had. And knowing that's the mental model that many of the parents in our schools will have going into it, how are we, and that they're going to be, the principals will be the ones they'll be interacting with and resetting that understanding. How are we providing that support? Are we providing that support to principals, and how are we doing it? I don't know who that question is directed to, but
I think it's a question actually for all of us, because we are all engaged in this work. When we're thinking about, thinking about OE11, which we'll talk about later tonight, but thinking about that framework for universal design learning, when we're thinking about what differentiation means, it does not mean lowering the standards for students at all. It's providing different ways that students can access, they can engage, and they can reflect and show their work. So it really is not thinking of, if I'm a high school teacher, it's not thinking I have 150 lesson plans I have to come up with. It's being really clear about what it is my students need to learn, and then providing what are multiple ways that they can access that, they can engage in it, and they can represent their learning. So that's one of the core things that we've actually been engaged as a system on, thinking about that kind of learning for several years. We've been working at elementary and at secondary with providing learning around that framework, really specifically in content areas at secondary. Like, that's been the focus of professional learning for the past 2 years with our secondary teachers. And that's been something that has been infused with our elementary leaders and the professional learning that's happened with teachers. That's really kind of the core of what I was talking about with math, is providing teachers with ways of thinking about core learning that give all students access points. So I think that's part of an answer, but like I said, this is something that all of us are engaged in.
I can add a little more. Principals in the Lake Washington School and Juanita schools currently are meeting with each family prior to transition to their new school, explaining the systems and programs. Some are having meetings in the former building, and then they're having meetings and welcoming sessions at their new school where all students belong. Many of the principals have engaged in gathering student voice and family experience voice, inviting families, new families with complex learning students in the new school in for coffees to see how it's going and what's working and what's not working for them. And many of our Lake Washington schools currently are working with peers as strong allies. And I just received a picture from Rush Elementary where a child goes to that school. I think he's in 2nd grade, and he has his 3rd play date with mates from his apartment. They all lived in the same apartment, never played together before, but now that he's a classmate and a peer, he actually has friends going to his house. So I think it's happening. It's happening with small meetings, then larger family meetings, and then through intentional vision communications and of missions of their school. Like at Sandburg Elementary has really got the ABCs of Sandburg Elementary and really communicating that belief along throughout the year.
I think it also helps to know that just along with the principal level directors who are frequently visiting their schools and are in their schools on a regular basis, the special service directors are also in those buildings on a day-by-day basis. So they are meeting with school teams and they're walking alongside building leaders, answering questions, problem solving, talking about unique situations or student needs. The reality is we have complex learners in full-time general education right now. So this is not new, it's just a slightly different manifestation of it. And so most of the time, those directors are problem solving, and then we also have program specialists. And they're special ed program specialists who are in there, boots on the ground, in classrooms, problem solving, modeling, collaborating. But we also have student service specialists. So the reality is that MTSS incorporates both the academic world and the social emotional world. And Johnny Fu couldn't be with us tonight, but just in speaking to his team is also in buildings on a daily basis working to support building leaders and staff. So there's multiple touch points, but I would say that it is learning from their colleagues. It's probably been the biggest difference maker. And so hearing those successes, learning from the mistakes has been incredibly valuable. You know, initially we didn't plan to roll this out in a cohort model. That actually was an idea generated from the group that was working on the inclusionary planning project development. And I was kind of hesitant about it at first, but it has ended up being probably the most powerful implementation model that I could have hoped for.
I did say 2 questions, so I will check if Director Stewart still has one.
I do, and perhaps you're going to address it later, and if you are, great. But I'll bring it up now just in case. At the Special Needs PTSA group, I think it was the 18th, we all heard parents who were scared to death because they hadn't heard information. They hadn't been taken to various locations to view that they had principals who didn't know. And to be quite frank, one of the parents that spoke that night was a parent that had chosen inclusion, and she just rattled their thought pattern, and it was so great. I want to know what specifically were the teachers that are concerned how it's going to work. It's the hows, not how it should be or how MTSS works, but how is it going to work with that child in my classroom and having a son that's autistic? I can say that child, I hope, but they aren't sure how it's going to work. It's the idea of, God knows, anytime anyone will watch me, dancing is hard, okay? But they say that Fred Astaire didn't have the hardest job. It was Ginger Rogers, because she had to do everything he did backwards. And I think it's the same way of having those new teachers in with the general ed classrooms. Everybody needs to know how it's going to work. The parents need to know how. They need to know that they're not going to lose paras, IAs. They're not going to they need to know they're not going to lose a resource. Tell me how it's going to work in that perspective, rather than you've gotten it down to about 100-foot level. That's great, but let's get it down to the ground if we could. And again, if you're going to address this later, thank you.
Stephanie touched on that a little bit. So getting principals and school teams into the schools where the students are currently attending is one way where we're bridging that. Each student needs slightly different things, so there is not a blanket here, just everybody do this training and you're good to go. It's creating those processes around this student's going to need this student's going to need this. The other thing is contextualizing, and what we've tried to do is this really isn't a special education issue, this is a gen ed issue. All kids have a place in the gen ed classroom. That's how the funding model actually works for special education. There are general education students first, and then there's additional funding provided for services based on need. We have not traditionally treated our students that way. So a lot of the work that's been happening in schools too is around just opening hearts and minds to what is possible. I visited, I think Craig's still back there. I visited Craig's school when we had principals. It was probably our most successful principal meeting of the year. We went into cohort 2 schools and visited the schools that already have inclusion up and running. And it looked different in different schools. But Craig was great in helping the principals and the school teams that came along understand that, you know what, you know how to do this. You're going to figure it out because you're going to get to know the kids and their families and what the needs are. And then you're going to keep working it until you get there. But it's really hard to do that when the kids are at some other school. So part of it is supporting through the transition. And I don't remember, I can't remember her name, but there was a person that spoke about staffing. John and I went to Juanita Elementary, I don't remember what day that was, but it was recently, to talk to their PTA and answer some of these questions. I think we're doing more of that too. I know after the special ed PTA meeting that some of us were at, there was another meeting held that Shannon attended to talk to families and come alongside the principal to help sort of allay some fear and give information about, no, if your student's receiving services, those services are driven by the IEP. The services continue to be delivered in the new location also. So, Mark, it's a lot of that. It's continuing to engage and making connections between the schools where the kids are currently attending in LC programs and the receiving schools so that those schools have a sense of who's coming and how to best prepare.
I appreciate what you're saying, and I think we have a unique opportunity tonight because we're videotaped and it's going to be streamed, and everyone's going to get a chance to see it time and time again, so they don't have to worry if it's at breakfast, night, or dinner, or whatever. I would love y'all to tell families in particular, please, let's dispel some of the rumors. It's going to make, first of all, it's going to make your job so much easier when you go to meet with parents because those misconceptions will be dispelled before you even get in the room, hopefully. I'm still, again, I'd love to have the teachers, I'd like to see a little bit more meat on how the teachers are being shown. Are they being introduced to the students that maybe they'll be getting in the fall? You know, all these things are components that parents are scared to death. And, you know, a lit cave is much less scary than a dark cave. And right now, they're in Carlsbad. And they don't know what's air and what's a stalactite.
So you can write an entire book, and there have been multiple books written about how you do inclusion. But there are critical key elements that can make it be more successful. And I have written a number of FAQs as well as a description of our inclusionary practice work on the Special Services webpage. That's easily accessible for families to be able to look at and read. But if you want to talk fundamentals means that you have a building schedule that has intervention blocks that allow children to stay in core content classes and get their specially designed instruction in small group learning activities during those intervention blocks. It means that you have inclusion help desks at the building where teachers have the opportunity to ask experts, how do I problem solve specific student situations that need support? It is having grade level PLCs include the special education teacher, and assigning a special education teacher to specific grade level bands, so they're not trying to go in and support children K through 5. You have one teacher assigned K2, you have one teacher assigned 3-5, and they're embedded working with those grade level PLCs. It means you're changing caseloads so that you have a sufficient staffing and supports to meet the needs of the students in the classroom. It means you have IEPs that are tied to the core standards and that have access points so that when the child is working on math, no matter what their abilities are, they can work on math in that same core content standard, but at their level. So those are just some of the pieces that make it work, including things like calming spaces in classrooms, teaching children self-regulation skills, all of those strong SEL PBIS strategies that benefit every single student. There's work that we're doing with paraeducators where we've built out a number of trainings for them to access next year about how you can support in the inclusive classroom environment and provide real-time efforts in support of kids. We've got other students where we're working with OTs, PTs, and SLPs to identify all of the necessary equipment needs, material needs, curriculum needs, and all of those are being purchased in order for the implementation in the fall. We have an August training that's undergoing planning right now in terms of helping both special education teachers understand how to do inclusion better and also general education teachers focusing on high quality instruction that benefits all students. And the list really does go on. But what we learned is that you understand how to do inclusion when you have your kids in the classroom. And through that natural relationship and experience between peers and the teacher and the student and the family, you're able to do something really, truly remarkable. Parents are being included in collaborative meetings between their current LC program and their neighborhood school. They have been invited to visit that neighborhood school. I have told any parent who has contacted me that you're open door to any of our inclusive schools. Principals will welcome you at any point in time to tour. Craig Mott just offered parents tours today, actually, to come and see his school and how it works and if they need to see it with their own eyes. So I think that there is a multitude of answers, but those are just some of the fundamentals, and those are all available on the webpage for parents to read further.
Is the website, are those FAQs being sent out to parents? Having it on a website is great, but if they don't know it's there, they're not going to see it.
Mm-hmm.
I would, if we're not sending it out, I'd love to see us sending it out because having it on a website doesn't mean anything because no one's going to see it if they're not reading the website daily, and who does? God knows I don't.
All right, I just want to make sure that they have the opportunity. Appreciate the questions. I just want to make sure, let's hold those. It's around communication. That's clear. So I just want to be able to hand it back so that you can continue.
Okay. Well, we're going to continue. We're going to, and just so the board knows, I think maybe I'll highlight some of the questions that are coming up. So it's important. I think one of the things that we have heard, right, is really what is it that we mean by an inclusive classroom or inclusive learning environment. So that's the next question that I'm going to ask the panel, but I'm going to share what questions are following that. And so I think you've heard Dr. Hitch talk about some of the lessons we've learned. So I'm going to be asking the panel, like, we've been engaged in this work over multiple years. And there's been lessons learned along the way. We've had successes, we've had some stumbles, and so we'll talk about those things and how we're applying that. And then finally, we'll talk about what are the next steps, both for this year and for looking into the future. So that's kind of the rest of the framework of the questions that I have for the panel. And so I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Hitch to just help give us a picture of when we say an inclusive classroom or inclusive learning environment, what do we really mean by that?
So This is a graphic that is coming from TASH, which is an organization that supports individuals with intellectual disabilities. And I love this graphic, except I do want it to be a little bit more colorful, because the reality is that most of those circles are fundamentally green dots, and I can tell you right now, you walk into any classroom and you're not seeing a bunch of green dots. You're seeing a rainbow of kids with different skills and abilities. But historically, just like you were sharing, Eric, is that there has been an exclusionary model. And that's the model that a lot of us grew up with, where we never saw a child with a disability in our schools. And those days of institutionalization and horror stories around what happened to people with disabilities are not in the too distant past. Many of us remember those days very clearly. Then you have segregation, and that's really where our learning centers are operating right now, where you're grouping together all the kids with disabilities together into one space. Now, there are some advantages of that, right? There's easily accessible resources. You're not having to purchase equipment across all your schools. You have teachers who really try and specialize and focus and develop skills in working with kids who are complex learners. But the research is abundantly clear that it's not effective. Even in the most amazing learning center or transition center, you will not see the same growth and progress as in a child being in a general education classroom. So the other areas of segregation that we see are when you pull multilingual learners into their own classes instead of integrating them into general education courses. Integration is, people call it inclusion, but it really is not, because what it is it's the kids who sit at the back of the room at their own table with a paraeducator. And there's an exercise that I've seen done at conferences before where they'll actually make people walk to the back of the room, to the table, and they'll have coloring pages back there for the adults. And it mimics the experience of what it feels like to be in a gen ed classroom and yet completely separate and apart from it. And then you have inclusion, and that's where kids are accessing core content, they're accessing the standards, and they're having the opportunity to demonstrate everything that they know and everything that they are capable of. And so really that's our goal, is to move kids towards those integrated classrooms. At the elementary level, what that looks like is trying to provide a continuum of services for every child in their neighborhood schools. It doesn't mean that children are going into into general education 100% of the time. It means simply that they have access to the continuum of supports and needs in their neighborhood school with their neighborhood friends and the families that are in their carpools together and their sports teams together and all of those other wonderful activities. At the secondary level, the access points are what we're really focusing on for our secondary schools. And so a lot of people talk about the power and the benefit of co-teaching, and that is an absolute inclusionary practice at the secondary level, and one in which we love to build upon and capitalize on. But you can't always guarantee co-teaching, because it does take a really strong relationship between teachers, and you can't really force that. So one of the things that we do is we look at all the different access points. So like, for example, Kirkland Middle School completely eliminated their organization classes. Why did they do that? Because the kids in special education who were required to take organization classes had no electives. Middle school is not the greatest time of your life, and the one thing that you really look forward to is an elective. And having to go to an organizational class instead of something like band is really disheartening. And so we're talking about those kinds of changes, or we're talking about creating the kind of programs that we can have from inclusionary sports, or we're talking about reducing the special ed core content classes and having kids get push-in services for those. or expanding CTE pathways that are more accessible. So really trying to help our secondary schools understand that there's multiple access points where they can start their inclusive journey. At the elementary, it's simply about returning kids to their neighborhood school and building from there. And that's really kind of where we're at in that kind of inclusionary implementation stage.
Kelly, I'm wondering if you could add a little bit on that, the same context, but thinking about the way that we've historically provided intervention services, but then thinking about, the context of the multitude of learners that you spoke to earlier.
Yes, so I think back to when I was a building principal in Lake Washington School District in 1999, and we had Safety Net in 1999, where we had small group instruction where kids were pulled out to have a reading intervention. And at that point in time, we thought this is the best way to meet the needs of our students who are not quite at grade level content in reading. So fast forward 20 plus years, and we are in the year 2023, and we're still pulling Safety Net students into small group instruction, sometimes missing core instruction. We're doing the same thing with our multilingual students by pulling them into classes outside of their classroom teachers, their general ed classroom. And we're not getting different results than we did 20 years ago. There are still kids who need Safety Net supports, and we're not accelerating their reading. I put a plug-in to change our Safety Net naming convention to accelerated learning or accelerated programs, because that's what we do with interventions. And the way that we can do that most effectively is by having students engage with their Tier 1 instructor, their classroom teacher, for core instruction. And then what they get is, for extra supports, is in addition to core instruction. So I know you've heard us use the adage core plus more, and that's what we want for all of our students. And we believe that the right sizing of Safety Net will help support teachers to support students during core instruction so that they get that specialized Tier 2 support within the construct of by their general ed teacher, and then they get additional support during a block of intervention with their specialist, either their multilingual or their Safety Net teacher or accelerated learning teacher. The other piece that I want to talk to a little bit is that partnership between the teachers, and we talked a little bit about that as we're planning for more inclusivity. If we think about the relationship between the special educator and the gen ed teacher, the Safety Net and the gen ed, and the multilingual and the gen ed teacher, it's a core team that looks at what do our students know and what can they do, and how do we grow them from there? How do we enhance their learning? And that happens through a variety of different ways. Sometimes with co-teaching, it's a way that we've found to be highly successful within our multilingual program at the elementary level, where we have had the opportunity to have the co-teacher, the multilingual and the classroom teacher partner together, so the students are experiencing the same content with SIOP, sheltered instruction, observation protocol, modifications to make all the learning accessible for students. And that truly, when the teachers are in the classroom with the students, that's inclusion.
All right, Stephanie, earlier I told you you're going to be like our color commentator. So Stephanie spends more time in our schools than any one of us. And I know the times that I've had a chance to tour our cohort schools, have been really impressed with what that experience looks like in our classrooms. And I'm just wondering if you can just kind of like at a very kind of practical level, just kind of explain like what are some of the, like we were walking into one of the schools, what would an inclusive classroom look like? What would be the things that we would see or that you see on a daily basis?
Yeah, I think we have 7 elementary schools in the Lake Washington School District that are being highly successful. They didn't know exactly what it would look like when it started, and they learned that there isn't a playbook or a checklist, the things that they need to do to prepare for this, that it has been a group of strong teachers and teacher teams working together, collaborating with Debbie Wagner and district supports to create inclusive environments for the students that entered their classrooms this year. And it looks, when I go into all of the schools in the morning, they're there for Welcoming Circle. Students are participating either using can't think of the word, yes, or giving high fives or whatever that is. It could look like in a math classroom I was in last week at Sandburg, where the students were working on fraction in 5th grade. And Sandburg is not a cohort school, but they do have students who are included in their school. And one of the students was accessing the curriculum by identifying the numerator and the denominator. I might have done that backwards, I apologize. But they could identify the two numbers because that's where they were, while the other students were working on complex fractions. So it looks different, and as Principal Motz will tell you, inclusion is a continuum. There'll be one day a student is included 80% of the day, and then that next day, for whatever reason, they're not able to participate as much. So it's always something they're working with, a group of individuals to support students with complex needs. So is that what you were asking me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm better when we're watching hockey, Kraken color, than I am with this.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I like the circles. I was really impressed. I had an experience at Franklin where I walked into a classroom, and the class was part of the morning routine as they were sitting in a circle, and that's part of our restorative practices and part of the ways that we support social emotional learning. And there was a child in that classroom that required some mobility assistance. I believe she used a wheelchair, and her classmate had cleared a space to make sure that she could sit. You could be right next to me, and the student also used an assistive communication device. And what was really impressive was that the class really exhibited the patience for the student to be able to work on the fine motor skills to be able to use the device, to be able to ask the question that they were going around, and to be able to engage with her peers. And it was the type of environment I think that we've all kind of, we as adults did not experience as part of our educational. And I really looked at those children with kind of the envy that they were exhibiting empathy. They knew how to interact with each other, and they really looked at. They weren't looking through the eyes of any sort of deficit or disability, but that they were really truly accepting of each other. And so it was those sorts of experiences that then also create. I mean, we talked a lot about the academic supports, but I think it's all of the social emotional learning work that we've been doing over multiple years also feeds into this. And I know Shannon's talked a little bit about that. I'm going to transition us into, we've learned some lessons over the last few years. We started this several years ago with integrating our preschools, and so our preschools became fully inclusive. And at our elementary schools now are a couple of years into that. And, we've talked a lot about MTSS. I'm going to have Kelly talk just briefly about, this is a stack model, which is slightly different kind of than the traditional 2D model of MTSS, but that's really important, and you've heard this team talk about that. So I'm going to have Kelly talk about that, and then we'll just share some of the lessons that we've learned that you've kind of heard them make a nod to, but I want them to point back out. So, Kel.
So as we look at the shift from, you're probably very used to seeing the two-dimensional triangle for MTSS. And this 3D model says it perfectly, that all children receive Tier 1 support. Students who receive Tier 1 support and need more get Tier 1 plus more, not just Tier 1 and in lieu of Tier 1, Tier 2, which is represented in the old model of MTS, or the old depiction of the MTSS model. And so we think about students who then again receive tertiary or Tier 3 supports, get core plus Tier 2 modification and support, and then Tier 3. I think it's important to, when we look at this model, they're actually, in the model that we're going to be implementing next year, I had a model that actually moved and we added a tier 2.5, which would include the block schedule for safety net, multilingual students who receive special services, as an addition to tier 2 in the classroom. So we want every student to get that tier, that students who need extra support get it from their gen ed teacher as part of tier 1, and then get tier 2.5 from a specialist at a time outside of core.
And I think you just mentioned the master schedule. I believe that's been one of our learnings. I don't know if one of you can kind of speak to the importance of that we've learned in kind of our cohort, I believe kind of our cohort 1 experience.
I feel like we've covered that, but we have spent some intentional time engaging in the master schedule to make sure that all interventionists and teams can work together and support. So if everybody did reading at the same time during the day, it'd be very difficult for our specialists to intervene. So there's a strategy in creating that. You create that with a team of teachers. You create that with your special ed staff, your ML staff, so that you can make sure that you can support all of these students.
I was actually just talking with Jill Vanderveer, the principal at Redmond High School, and she was having a moment of celebration because she had just come through the absolute whirlwind that it is to create a high school master schedule. And you just will never get it unless you're a high school principal and you have to create one. Just what an undertaking it is. And she was so excited because she had managed to create a schedule that put all of her co-teachers into common planning times. And that's the kind of work that requires a real effort on a principal's part. And then when it is built that way, you are setting people up for success. So it's not just block schedules, but it's allowing for opportunities for co-planning, for teachers to work together with one another, for teachers and paraeducators to work together, for therapists to work with teachers in training them from everything on how to use AAC devices to sensory supports, and the list goes on. You know, the reality is when I started here in Lake Washington about 5 years ago, we had more children self-contained for nearly the entirety of their day than Seattle School District, than Bellevue School District, than Mercer Island School District, than Issaquah School District. Almost more than a third of our children with complex needs spent nearly their entire day in a special education environment. And so the biggest success that we have seen is that we have dropped that number down to less than 7% of our kids with complex disabilities now spend a majority of their day in special education, and that's with just one cohort of schools. So I'm excited to see what comes from the second cohort. And Matt asked me to share a little bit about kind of what have been the wins and the challenges. I would say the wins definitely include that kids are with complex disabilities are spending more time in general education, and as a result, their academic outcomes are improving. The other thing that we see is improved social and emotional well-being and behavior that comes from that sense of belonging and being a part of friendship groups in their school. We have seen empathy and social emotional growth and development from the peers in those classrooms. And I had the opportunity to watch a club at Franklin Elementary School that's half kids with complex disabilities and half kids that are not with complex disabilities. And they were providing professional learning to their teachers on how to support complex learners. And they were the ones teaching the teachers how to use AAC devices. And I'm like, Keith is the most brilliant man alive because he has figured out that the best people to teach AAC devices are kids, not adults. But that kind of opportunity has been amazing. It's friendships growing, families not feeling isolated, special educators feeling not isolated and a part of their school teaching community. Those are the benefits. The challenges come from things like figuring out the practicalities around resources and staffing, what staffing model works, what staffing model doesn't work. We've had a lot of staff shortages, both in special education staff and in classified staff, and that does not help when you're trying to implement change. We've also had surprises where we had one school set up to be an inclusive school, and all of a sudden 7 children with complex needs moved in August. And all of a sudden we had to turn on a dime and try and figure out how to support them in that kind of work. I think we have an inability to pull all special ed teachers together because of the staff shortage and the fact that they are so desperately needed in their classrooms and their buildings. It's really difficult to pull them all together at one time, which is why I'm so excited about the coaches, because that embedded learning is going to be their access point. And I think communication is always a challenge when you're in a district as large as ours and as complex as ours. And in my personal hope and opinion, the conversations with families, my desire was for them to be intimate with people that they know, with people they have relationship with. And so could we have communicated better on a district level? Absolutely. But at the same time, I also recognize that those communications are very individualized and personal and intimate in their nature. I would say that we have found that by implementing inclusion, there has been a laser-like focus on instruction, and that has been wonderful and that has been challenging because we have seen where it's happening really well and we have seen where we have gaps that we need to address. I think having the implementation happen at the same time as bargaining, where that is where staffing and other considerations happen, that makes the situation a little bit more complex because it's hard to alleviate staff concerns and anxieties when you're in the middle of that work with them at the time. And I think, you know, special education teachers have had somewhat of a challenge of their identity having to shift because they really feel strongly, as they should, that they're masterful teachers of kids with significant disabilities. And they are fearful and anxious about what their learning experiences are going to be like in general education. They're incredibly protective, fierce teachers. And so asking them to take a leap of faith and interact with colleagues in general education to support students has been hard for them. It's emotional. It's a big change in the system, and change is hard for people. I think principals have had a lot of questions about staffing and supports, just as teachers have had. And again, that's all been a fluid process this year. And then, you know, of course, families, some of them are excited, some of them are angry, some of them are anxious. They're all in different places, and we are trying to meet them where they're at with a transparent open door policy that at any point in time I'm happy to meet with school teams or families as the directors do and our program specialists do and as principals do, because they're the ones who have those relationships with the students and the families.
I'm wondering if anybody else, I think Shannon pointed out a couple of things, right? That is, by engaging in this focus on inclusion and by being really intentional about the multi-tiered systems of support, Shannon mentioned, you know, it's actually drawn in some focus on core instructional practices. And we talked a lot about schedule, but some of these systemic sort of things. So I don't know if there's, before we move on from this to our final question, which is essentially what are the next steps, if there's any other kind of lessons learned, perhaps more in a general education context that
In other words, Shannon, you're talking too much.
No, yeah, Shannon, you're doing wonderful.
I think I'll just quickly, I was just meeting with one of my principals this week, and how I don't even know if this is a lesson learned. I'm sorry, Matt, if I'm not hitting the nail. But she learned that now, after including these new students into the classrooms, her ML teachers are like, we're next. We want to be more inclusive. We do not want to do a pull-out program anymore. We want to push in. So it's having an impact on the whole system, the entire system, and I believe instructional outcomes are going to improve for all students.
And I was pausing because so much of when we think about what we learned ties directly to what our next steps are. So when I was thinking about just leaning into what Shannon said about instruction and what Kelly was saying, that just really leaning into what we understand about instruction and what assumptions that we made about instruction. And to go back to the earlier points of there aren't little green dots in our classroom, there's a rainbow, there's a range of learners, and that as we lean into this work, it becomes something that we knew and we're really attending to at all levels of the system. So I think you heard from the group many of the things that we're planning on doing for our next steps, but I'll call some of them out specifically. So thinking at a systems level, at the, to your point, Director Stewart, like starting at the 1,000-foot or 100-foot level, we're thinking about how and planning on doing deep alignment of our work from multiple departments. So like level directors work very closely with teaching and learning, K-5 directors, with special education, with that dynamite team, with people who are in buildings regularly. So we're thinking about the resources that we're providing and the planning we're doing here and really connecting it to systemically, how does that play out in a school? We're using tools like the FIA, the Fidelity Inventory Assessment, and the least restrictive environment to help guide us systemically and help schools think, what are the indicators that show that we're on the right path towards truly inclusive education and a great education for our students? So there's that systems level of it. Then there's the thinking about the school level of it with, again, engaging with the FIA. And then the building leaders, really thinking about how our building leaders are instructional leaders and reframing and focusing some of what that means and being more specific with that. Really thinking about every educator in this district has a deep why that is about caring for students and aligning how that shows up in their work being instructional leaders and how they support teachers to feel confident and competent and to really think about the conditions they're creating in a school for teachers to have really dynamite PLCs and to know the resources that they have, to engage with each other about learning, to be really open to thinking that there's, looking at how they support each individual student. So it's creating the conditions for our teachers to really be comfortable learning and be pushing themselves to think that even though we grew up with one way of thinking about learning, that is not the way that honestly worked when we were growing up, and that we now have a pretty strong moral obligation to redo and rethink so that we're meeting the needs of all of our learners. So it's a really exciting opportunity for that. And I think you heard tonight, and I think you would hear in the schools, a lot of joy that comes from that, of feeling that we take a risk, and it's really empowering for us as educators to see how empowering it is for kids to be in this mix. So then thinking about the resources we're providing and planning for that intentional alignment of resources, and again, providing for teacher learning, thinking about the other people and planning intentionally for like the work, it came up here, the work that we're doing with our paras or that they're doing with each other so that they're also feeling that they're directly, positively, powerfully engaged in the learning of students. That it is really about learning. It is not so much about supervision. It's deeply about learning. And as has come up, and I think this is where lessons learned comes into next steps, thinking about and planning for engaging our parents. So what Steph was talking about with the visits to each school and really engaging with each family and with the students is part of our next plans and our lessons learned. So we're kind of going back and forth as a system to be able to go up to the top level and think systemically, up to 100-foot level, and then think, what does that really feel like for the parent and the student? And how does every piece of that align? And I'll give it an example of the way that we're planning on this. So we're thinking about our preschool kids coming into our schools next year as kindergartners. We really want to make that transition smooth. So tomorrow afternoon at 1 o'clock, all of our elementary building leaders are going to Old Redmond Schoolhouse, where they will engage in learning led by the preschool staff and by our special education staff in learning about inclusive practices specific to this incoming kindergarten class. And they're doing this learning tomorrow because on May 26th, all of their kindergarten teachers are going to engage in deeper learning again at Old Redmond Schoolhouse. So the kind of thinking that we're doing is really thinking, what are these big picture pieces and how does it help us think about the individual student experience and plan for all those pieces in between.
And I was just thinking, what are some next steps that we're taking for the 23-24 school year? I really want teachers to hear and know that they're doing this work or much of this work already. And we might be calling it something different. We may be saying we're UDL or we're differentiating, but really those are the changes and the supports that they're always already giving to the students in their classes. And so how do we draw a through line between inclusivity and the work that they're already doing? So, because it's not an add-on, it's work that they have done differentiated. Like Eric, go back to Eric's point when he was talking about segregation, essentially, of the experience that we had when we were children. Elementary teachers have been differentiating for like 3 or 4 full groups of students and student levels within their classrooms already. So it's just drawing that through line to what they know already and to help lift them up to know that a lot of what they do is already the right work. We might just be calling it something different.
All right, so
May I ask a follow-up question specifically? Yes. So we heard about for staff. How about for community members and families in regards to the next steps?
Are you asking specific to? Okay. So for the families, the expectation is that they are going to have a transition meeting between their neighborhood school principal and teacher team and their current LC teacher and principal. For a lot of schools, that's already happened. But for others, those are still in process. So there's basically this opportunity to establish relationship with this new principal and team prior to ever coming on campus. And then there is the opportunity for the family and the student to visit the school, as well as the opportunity for the teachers to collaborate with one another and the therapists to collaborate with one another so that we can be sure that the new team who's receiving that student has a depth of knowledge and understanding about that child. And so those are happening now, and those are sometimes in the context of IEP meetings, and sometimes they are just simply transition meetings. And so that's kind of really how it's happening, is at that individual child level with the families and the school teams.
Okay, so so I'm assuming we can open up to questions at this point. There we go. All right, I was waiting for the next slide. I'm going to go with Director Choi and then Director Stewart.
I just had a follow-up to that question. What about for families who don't have a special need kid, but are hearing about inclusion and don't have experience? Is there a communication outreach going to families to tell and explain what is inclusion and what can they expect for their kids' classrooms?
I'll take this. I think one of the things that we've recognized is kind of the general understanding around what is it that we mean, that this thing that is being described that may be happening at your school that is very different. And so tonight is part of that, and actually getting this group around, and that's one of the reasons one of our questions was around what is inclusive education. And so we'll be working with our communications department to try to create more of a portal kind of into the schools that can illustrate what that looks like. We believe it might take in the shape of some videos, vignettes that we'll be communicating out, over kind of through the end of the school year and into the next school year. So that plan hasn't been refined. I couldn't tell you exactly what that series looks like, but I think there's really impactful to see what kind of what it is, what it isn't, and to dispel some of those things. So that's going to be something that we'll be working on, and has been informed by the feedback that we've received from families.
Well, I had one more question. So there seems to have been very thoughtful work done around elementary school level inclusion. I know that we've been doing these cohorts for a few years now, which means that we do have, I believe, elementary school students who are in fully inclusive environments moving into middle school next year, where we haven't launched a pilot for a secondary school, what it looks like for full inclusion. And correct me if I'm wrong. So I'm curious, what is the effort for those students who have benefited and experienced from this fully inclusive learning environment going into secondary education that might not be fully inclusive?
So the child's IEP that reflects the amount of time that they're in general education versus special education and who provides that service remains the same from when they shift from elementary to when they move into secondary. So there's no expectation that a child who is in a fully inclusive program at elementary should somehow slide back down into a self-contained program when they hit secondary. So we actually have had one of our middle schools doing inclusionary practice work. They have been working with TIES in the UW. That's been Kirkland Middle School. So we have learned some things from them. But ultimately, secondary schools just look a little bit different than elementary schools do. So kids are already in their neighborhood schools at the secondary level. That's the big shift that's happening at elementary, is just moving kids to neighborhood schools. They're already at their neighborhood schools at secondary. And so that's where it's important that we have our principals looking at all the variety of on-ramps that they can utilize to really offer more and more opportunities for kids to participate in general education activities and learning. But all of the instructional work, the general education foundational instructional work, is K-12. And that's really the work of the general education team and teaching and learning, and special ed is there to help support that. So there is no expectation that children are going to transition into a space that's not going to support them as equally well as what they had at elementary.
So I guess I can clarify my question a little bit. It sounded like from the descriptions you were giving about the supports for these students at elementary, there was a lot. Training for principals and staff, and special ed teachers are relooking at how they're doing their jobs, co-teaching. Like there's been so much done to make this successful in elementary. Are our secondary teachers and principals going to get the same level of supports?
Yes, they actually have been. So our secondary principals have been part of Universal Design for Learning instructional methodology. They have been looking at CTE pathways for students. They have been looking at ways to expand co-teaching, like I shared with you about Jill at Redmond High School, changing their schedules to include co-planning opportunities. So they are very much coming along inside what elementary is doing. And so they are learning as we learn as we go through the elementary process.
And I'd add, just to reinforce, that all of the work that's been around instruction over the past few years has really been around that. And as we've shared with you with adoptions, when we look at resources, having all students have access points has been something that's been core to just looking at foundational resources for that. And just a couple examples that came up earlier, Shannon was talking about with co-teaching, and some schools making decisions where, like Kirkland not having organizational classes. So those are things that are happening more, happening just as deeply, but almost more like it doesn't look at, they're more like, they look like more pockets than they really are. Elementary is much more of a broad sweep, but in secondary, that same really powerful work is happening.
you're psychic. The biggest pushback I think would ever get is not from the parents that are going to, whose students are going to benefit from being included versus a resource room, although they have their fears. But it's the families that have never encountered a special needs student, a special needs neighbor, nephew, niece, son, or daughter. They're going to be the biggest obstacle because their fears are of exaggerated examples or incidents that have happened or they've been told have happened, whether it's flying chairs or whatever, kids melting down and then disrupting the whole day. So I encourage us to really push out to those folks. The questions that I'm getting, will my student IEP change dramatically or change just because he or she is included versus the resource room? I.e., or for example, will I lose my one-on-one for my son or daughter? They want to know that, and we need to be able to tell them that, preferably tonight. Will paras be cut? I find it hard to believe we'd ever cut paras, but would paras be cut? And that's a fear of the parents are having. Can we please tell them tonight that paras are not going to be cut, that there will be support services within the classroom? It's important. Also, was there a discussion, I assume there was, and I'd hope, why are we waiting until August for the training? There's teachers right now, they'd like to not have 2 months of worry in June and July, waiting to find out how that's going to happen, how they're going to work together. Many of them would like to know that before they leave for their summer vacation, because they can actually enjoy their summer vacation and without having 8 weeks of fretting over what might be something not to fret over.
Are you talking about the kindergarten training?
I'm talking about we're saying, I think, Shannon, you're saying that there will be an education process for the teachers in August.
So that's the training I'm referring to. We have an annual training for all special education staff, happens in August every year. And the focus of the training this year is going to be more on the special education side of the picture, around how to write inclusive IEPs and how to utilize paraeducator supports. Some of those considerations, how to have access points in the core content. The teachers in our inclusion cohort schools have been learning that from on-the-job learning from building principals, from specialists, from special ed directors, from program specialists. For the special ed teachers in particular, we're going to do some more focused training just for them in August. But they have been participating in trainings at the building level on all of these strategies and implementation pieces and instructional pieces all year long. And some of them participated in it last year as well. So it's not a matter of training waiting. It's that in August, we're going to do some more specialized training specifically with special educators.
Speak to the other question, Mark. No, this is not an intent to water down IEPs or to, in fact, quite the opposite. Services follow the student. So if the student's IEP drives service, which is what they do, then those services are provided in the location where the student is. So that is sort of in lack of information. We fill it in with our worst fear, and that has happened some. That's part of what Matt was talking about in terms of communication from the district. Those are some holes we need to fill in.
Thank you.
The other piece, I don't know if she's still sitting back here because I can't see behind me, but highlighting some of the stories of success of our parents who have experienced inclusion. We used that at Juanita the other night, and that really, just being there and having the conversation with the PTA parents, I think really helped alleviate some of that concern. The other thing I would say in reference to the working with families who don't have students with complex learning needs. Arguably, they do have learning needs, but there's a lot of organic sort of working with neurodiversity that's occurring in schools on the soccer fields. And I know there's been some intentional work done. Like I went to Rose Hill, it was earlier this year, and there was a parent group for kids who had been included, and they were just sharing some of their stories. And the parents hearing this father speak about his little second grader who was in a different school and who watched his neighbors go to school, and he got dropped off by the bus, and sort of the teachers always met him, to his experience in the neighborhood school where all the little neighborhood kids now wait for him at the parent drop-off line and walk him over and make sure that the kids are going to help us with some of that work, that seeing how our students are responding and the empathy and the just sort of emotional maturity, honestly, that some of our kids are displaying is really going to work wonders for some of that dynamic, I think.
We really started this work with a deep dive into ableism, because it's the one ism that is still broadly accepted and appreciated in our society today. And so one of the things that we have really focused on is illuminating the depth of ableism within our culture, our society, and our schools, in the way that we talk about kids, the way that we treat students, the way that other students treat one another. And so that has been intensively been a focus of the work, because we would never say some of these comments if the child was a child of color, if this child was in poverty, if this child had experienced trauma. So the fact that we feel comfortable talking about the perceptions of families about having kids with special needs in their classroom is at the depth and core of ableism. And that's something that we have to address, and principals have been learning about that intensively. And that's one of those biggest aha moments for a lot of people, because you don't realize that you're swimming in that water until you have the opportunity to look at it from the outside. And that's one thing we've really tried to really press on.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it, because addressing these central points just simply and to the point is what the parents need and want to hear. I will just share one thing about inclusion. When my son was in high school, Ribbon High, he wanted to get into choir. He'd had music therapy for years. Teacher fought it for a while. Within 2 weeks, she became our biggest advocate. In the springtime, as anybody that goes to Redmond High knows, they have Night on Broadway, and JT auditioned, and his music therapist had been instructing him on Ada Weiss and playing the guitar. The teacher turned to the rest of the class and said, we all experience stage fright at some point in our career, or the first time we're on stage and there's lights and there's people mumbling out in the dark. Would a few of you please volunteer to be his backup singers, just in case? 12 kids out of that 18 kids in that classroom volunteered. That's what it means to have students being the best part of inclusion. And I thank you for your efforts. I don't mean my questions to be mean or to be putting you on the spot. I'm trying to ask the questions that parents are asking me or crying to me about. They don't know. And we can't, the more communications, the better, folks. I appreciate it. I know that you guys are working multiple days in one 24-hour period, but communications is going to be the key to making this a success. I don't want to see it fail. Thank you.
I want to take the chance. I don't see any other hands up for questions, to say thank you for the information and actually the work you're doing in being able to really push in bringing this forward and doing so in a concentrated effort. I do echo the thoughtfulness of the thought in regards to, especially with elementary. I think there might be some questions in regards to secondary and that component. I think that's still, at least I know I still sit here going, I'm not quite sure, I'm 100% sure where that is going and how that will work. I also do wonder about the parents who do not have kids in special education and inclusion. Are we, knowing the work that was done in the elementary school, to really think community within that setting? Are we doing that same thing in our secondary schools so that that same work is done for for students who are not in, or families who do not have a student in special education? Just because they're coming from different cohorts, right? We have some schools where a lot of that work's been done and others, and they're going into a bigger pond. So how do you make sure that that's still an inclusive, welcoming environment for them in that way? So I guess that'd be the one piece I would wonder about. No need for an answer, just sort of leaving that. But thank you. Anything else from, okay, Mark, Director Stewart.
Peer tutors are essential that I saw in the high schools, and I'm hoping that's part of the process in the elementary as well. I saw a kid who was considered by all these other teachers as a little thug because he always got in trouble, always fighting, and they made him into a peer tutor. And when he walked into that music room, he was a totally different kid. He was dancing and singing with my son, encouraged him to do the same with others. And that kid was allowed to shine, and he was in an environment where he wasn't being picked on, criticized, or assumed that he was going to be causing a trouble that hour. And he grew miles in that year. I would hope that we continue that, and we would broaden it to the elementaries, and we encourage it even higher in the high schools and the middle schools. It is so important. And even if it rotates, this week it's Johnny, next week it's Susie, whoever, and people get to know each other even more. But it is so essential in the development of not just the special needs kid, but the other kids.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to present to you in a very different way. And appreciate our panel tonight, who we kind of pulled together with very short notice and asked them to share kind of their expertise. So thank you very much, everybody.
All right, thank you. I'd like to recommend just a 10-minute break, 5-minute break, I've been told. It will, so we will start with 5, just to get a chance to run to the restroom. So we will be back at 9:35. 8. Seconds till the monitor pops up.
Great.
Welcome back. All right, so we are ready to continue our meeting after that. So thank you for the panel discussion and the inclusion update. Hopefully we can pull some from there and be able to utilize that going forward as well. It was very beneficial to sort of get that overall view from a variety of staff as well, so thank you. With that, the next items on our non-consent agenda are related to policies. We have 2 policy revisions, OE 14 and OE 11, and then we have 2 new policies, the governance commitments 10 and government's commitment 11. I do know that that Director LaLiberty might like to make a motion.
I move that we continue the discussion around OE, the updates to policies OE 14 and OE 11 to our next meeting on May 22 for the reason of allowing time for a robust conversation earlier in our meeting.
Second.
All right, so it has been moved by Director LaLiberty and seconded by Director Stewart, in which to table and move our 2 policies, OE 14 and OE 11 revisions, to the May 22nd board meeting. Any discussion?
Only one thing.
Yes, Director LaLiberty.
I was just, the board has now worked on this OE 14 twice at different meetings. We have not received a whole lot of community feedback around it, so Hopefully, pushing it to the 22nd will provide an opportunity for our community to provide additional comments to the board on the proposed revisions.
Excellent, as well as for OE11. Any
As well
other
as- yeah.
discussion? All right, hearing none, then we will take a vote. All those in favor of moving these to the May 22nd board meeting, please signify by voting aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Those will then be on our May 22nd. Please do take the time to read through those if you have any additional questions, as well as our community if they have any things they'd like to bring up. So then our next item on the agenda is for a new policy, which is Governing Commitment 10, GC10, Digital and Social Media Conduct of the Board Members. So Dr. Holman?
So at the board's extended study session in March, one of the policies we discussed was digital and social media conduct policy. This stemmed from a conversation that the board had, I believe it was December, around some goals that the board set around your self-assessment. And so just given the unique nature of digital and social media, the board thought it would be a good idea just to have some guideposts that really do help the board as you interact through digital communication, social media, and those pieces. And so brought a draft policy to the board in March. The board reviewed and provided feedback to that. What you see here is an update to that with the board's feedback and in those pieces. And so it's here tonight for a first reading for the board to review. Any comments and feedback will be taken. If there's a request for modifications, we'll bring that back, provide that to the board prior to the next meeting with proposed formal action at our next meeting in May.
If you could do a favor and just post that policy up on the...
Yes.
Thank you.
The other, yes.
All right, so that we will not be voting to approve. This is only just discussion for any questions or pieces that you have. So I will open it up to discussion. Any questions? Any concerns? Any feedback?
Looks good.
All right, that is feedback.
Yeah, I have no further revisions to the policy.
All right, so so the only question that I have that I will put out is this is set up as a separate policy. We also do have board member conduct, and this could fall under that governing commitment and that policy. I'm not sure it really matters. We can keep it separate or we can merge it.
I would like to keep it separate.
It's easier since it's already written that way. Okay. So no further discussion. Everybody's sort of in agreement. This is sort of setting the stage, knowing that we are much more into social media and digital media, sort of how as board members, because we do fall under the Open Public Meetings Act as well as the Public Records Act. So anything we say or do is available as a public record. So this is to help sort of define some of that and what that means. And as we are a 5-member board, there's also that component that one individual member can't speak for the entire board. So that's sort of the goal. But hearing no discussion on this, I think we can be done. It will be brought back at our next board meeting, May 22nd. It will be placed on the consent agenda, so I'm not hearing any change. So we'll just go through that way.
Sounds good.
Okay.
May I suggest we put it on non-consent? If we're going to have a first reading tonight, I think there may be more discussion to come.
So
I think it should be on non-consent.
Any discussion around? If there's not consent, then we should put it on non-consent.
Okay. My only thought is that we've discussed this as a board once. I don't have any comment tonight. I'm not hearing anyone from anyone else. We can always, between now and the next meeting, if somebody flags something or there's additional consideration, we can pull it from the consent agenda. But it just to move things along and avoid late meetings again. I already talked too much about it tonight, so there we are.
Okay, so the plan will be on consent agenda. If there are concerns, it can always be pulled off by one board member can request, and then it can be concurred by a different board member. So with that, we will move on to the next policy, which is Governing Commitment 11, and this is the legislative representative roles and responsibility. We've had this position for a while. WASDA is who done it, but we did not have anything ever defined in our policies in regards to the roles and responsibilities. So I will go ahead and let Dr. Holman give an introduction to it.
And so as we think about the ledge rep position, and we think about the board's interest in being highly active and highly influential at a number of different levels, both local, state, and federal, thought that pulling some language and information from WASDA and I believe one other sort, maybe NSBA, National School Board Association, around the role of the legislative representative. This just starts to define some of the expectations for that position. We have those expectations for the president. We have those expectations for the vice president. And so just defining what this role is can help the board know what to expect on an annual basis from this position. This individual will coordinate and collaborate with the president, with me, with Associate Superintendent Barbara Posthumus, and then our new staff member Caitlin Cox around many of these efforts, just to make sure that there's consistent coordination. And as we think about our legislative priorities as a school district, it's really about how do we move those forward and get those communicated well, connecting with our local delegation around those efforts. And so some of these are technical details, others of these are somewhat aspirational from how we're connecting with our legislators. And so you'll see here there's kind of three categories of responsibilities from local. One of those is actually supporting the development of the legislative priorities for the district and getting that moved forward, participating in WASDA activities related to positions and things like that. In September, there's a meeting, the General Assembly, which really is the voice of the district for the statewide positions that WASDA holds. When you think about state level responsibilities, it's ongoing meetings in the fall into the winter with our delegation. It's during the legislative session, ensuring that we have kind of consistent connection and voice, participating in the legislative conference that is offered each year. And then at the federal level, I know we've had, I know Mark, you've participated in the Washington, D.C. series. I think you've attended. And as we think about our influence, knowing that that's an important part of this as well in terms of our roles and responsibilities. So that's the information and kind of where it came from. And tonight's a first reading, so any comments the board has around this would be happy to take and bring back additional version of this for the second reading.
Director Stewart?
I think that it's great because, to be quite frank, I've been ledge rep twice and I never knew what in the hell I was supposed to do other than trying to contact legislators. I also, now that we have a staff member that is concentrating on legislation, I would hope, and Barb gives an excellent update every meeting that we have of the things that we have or haven't received, or the updates that didn't hit the AP, if you will. I would hope that the ledge reps in the future will have an opportunity to work hand in glove with the staff and have them, as especially the support, to give the ledge rep to be more informed for updates in a given meeting. That would be fantastic.
Director Choi?
Two things that I think potentially are missing, and it's up for debate, would be something about maybe under local responsibilities, partnering with legislative representatives from other school districts for advocacy work. And then the only other thing that was kind of missing from this was, what about bringing information back to the board, that side of the responsibility of the position? Information learned or gleaned from these conferences or meetings, updates on legislation, or, I don't know, are we keeping that with Caitlin and staff? And that's a question for everyone.
So if I could just, so one of the bullet points is at each board meeting, coordinate with staff to provide a legislative update and action report related to the board's legislative priorities. Is that what you're speaking to in regards to that feedback, or are you looking broader than that?
I guess I only saw it at local responsibilities. So I was thinking, is it a general?
Here currently, it's dealing with the state. It's not dealing with our local city councils, is sort of how this is written currently.
Mm-hmm.
It is really focused on the state and the federal.
Right.
Director Stewart.
We went through this once, and we actually renamed for at least a year or two Ledge Rep into the Community and Legislative Rep, whatever it was, I forget now, liaison, and to incorporate the locals, to make sure we had outreach, especially, you know, as you're getting a year in ahead of the elections for our levies and so forth. It's vital that we have the good relationships with the city councils. To be quite frank, we can't all have the same relationships with the state representative or senator that maybe someone at the city may have, or they can help polish that relationship. So I really would encourage us to have the local on there as well.
Director Liberty.
Thank you, Director Bleasner. Two minor things. One, this is an officer role for the board, I believe.
It is not currently listed as an officer role. It is an elected role, but is not listed under the officers.
I noted that in GC4 that it's not, and my question is why not? It is something that when we lost the ability to speak coherently. When we reorganize, we elect the president, vice president, legislative rep. Seems like this could live in GC4.
It could.
Okay.
It's that same thing. The question around it is that an officer position or not, as it was defined specifically as legislative rep. So we created it separately to be able to hold that conversation here, as opposed to making an assumption.
Okay. That leads perfectly into my next point, sort of, which is when I served in the role of legislative rep, one of the challenges I found was trying to understand not just what the responsibilities were, but what authority I had as a board member or as the legislative rep. And so when I look at what we have for GC4 for our officer roles, which I think is an important part of an officer, is that as a board we delegate certain authority to officers. That's what an officer is. I think that same applies to the legislative rep. We do delegate some amount of authority. Things happen at what was the legislative assembly, where there isn't necessarily specific, precise board direction on that, and so there is some level of discretion and authority. So to me, it is an officer role within the board, and that I would also, and then consistent with that, I think the policy should speak to not just responsibilities but authority.
So do you have specifics you think would be good to add there? It sounds like adding it into GC4 is what you're saying, so place it on as a third one. The other piece what are those delegation of authority?
Yeah, I mean, some of those are already captured in there in terms of responsibilities. I think just making clear that there is a level of authority granted to. I mean, similar to if our policy for the president and vice president speak to both specific authority and duties. To me, we are prescribing certain things that should occur, but also granting authority to act within that context. Does that make sense? Does that maybe
Totally makes sense.
Okay,
I'm just
good.
looking for the wording on it. So I can get the theory. I'm with ya.
I think one's potential solve, and I don't know if this applies to all of them, but just mirroring the language we have for the other officer roles, that the legislative rep has the following specific authority and duties or responsibility, whatever you want to choose for that word.
And what do you think those would be?
Well, at participating at I'm just thinking of WASDA by way of example, participating at WASDA and representing the board at that conference, in terms of representing the board's interests in, well, for example, prioritizing, I guess, what's the word I'm searching for? Advocating for certain legislative priorities at WASDA and WASDA's development of its priorities.
I would also.
I apologize, Director Blazner. I'm not at a point to be able to flag every single one, but that's just sort of example. You think about some of these are both responsibilities, and there's some amount of authority to delegate. And if you give me a moment, I could flag a few more for you,
or even better yet,
I could email that to you. How about that?
Yes.
Excellent.
And redline that to your heart's content and add, and that will be beneficial in being able to look through that.
I'd echo Eric's ideas. I'd also add that one of the things that needed for the leeway to operate is the ability to negotiate when you're talking to legislators, and to you may have to go to fallback positions. It's a give and take. It's not the school board speaks and then we just draw a wall. So we need to have that ability to have the authority to make moderation or to ask for more.
So I think that's as we define out what those roles and delegation of authority, part of the goal of setting legislative priorities by the board is to establish sort of the range of the positions in which things are working. So ideally, the legislative rep would be working under the guise of the legislative priorities. If something comes up outside of that, then that would be something to bring to the board for discussion. I know that was the work I needed to do when I was leg rep and we had issues that came up that the board had not spoken to. So therefore, I was not able to speak to it until we were able to speak to the whole board. So so the things that I hear walking away from, and I know that you've been writing notes over here as well. Partnering with ledge reps would be another role, bringing information, making sure that feedback loop is there, considering local and that piece and how does that get built in, potentially bringing it to GC4 as a separate officer position for legislative rep as opposed to a separate policy in general. Defining out the delegation of authority and the roles a little more clearly and specifically. And you're going to take that last one on and provide that and send me suggestions.
And support, and I think we ought to codify into the support of staff because I think that relationship needs to be codified in there.
And we can, I believe it might be, but we can look through and make sure that it is. If you want to take the chance as you look over it later and send that in case you don't see it there and what type of wording you might be looking for, that would be beneficial. All right, any other questions? This was just sort of some cleaning up of policies that we need to do to sort of have this in place. We haven't had this written down, so it's beneficial to have it finally. So as those positions shift, because we do board reorg in the second meeting in June on our calendar this year.
I think it's a meeting in June, right?
A meeting in June. In this case, it will be the second meeting in June. And that is one of those positions. So we wanted to make sure it was well defined to be able to make it clear. Any other comments or feedback on that? All right. Appreciate your taking the time to do that. Our next item is the superintendent report.
Yes, it is. So what you see in front of you is a draft kind of communication and engagement expectations that I've worked on with executive cabinet. I've brought to our strategic advisory leadership team, just as we have gone through a number of budget adjustments this year, and some we did well, some we didn't do so well in terms of engagement, and knowing that we have more budget work ahead, just some guideposts for us as we walk through any of these, large or small. I think those affected by the decisions that will be made in the coming year, they deserve to be treated similarly, in that we could make a decision that affects a lot of people, or we could make a decision that affects 2 to 3 people. They actually, for those individuals, the impact is the same experience, whether there's many people experiencing it or just a few. And so as you think about these as some kind of broad categories that we're going to think about, just the idea of broad communication of areas being considered for action. We know that the budget work we did this year, it wasn't broad communication. It was actually somewhat limited communication. And again, thinking about, how do we keep people engaged, trusting the process, believe that we're acting in good faith and with transparency, being upfront about this work is important. We actually have a racial equity analysis tool that provides language. And really, what is an equity analysis tool? It's a tool that asks a series of questions to ensure that appropriate considerations and impact are being considered. And so the use of that tool through these processes, targeting communication to those that are being directly affected, might be different communication than that broader communication. Providing data that's being referenced or used available to those affected, an opportunity for those that are affected to comment, preferably in person, because putting a face and a name to a situation and having that level of engagement is important. Clarity around timelines and decision making. And then it's also interesting when individuals go into feedback or comment session, just being clear about how is this feedback going to be used? Is this informational only? Does this actually help shape the decision? Or does that individual or group actually have the ability to influence the decision, meaning a preference for this over this? In that those that are directly affected by a decision actually receive direct communication. So there's a lot underneath all of these pieces, but you can imagine any one individual group that was affected this year, having gone through something like this, probably on the other end of it would have felt more, I'll just say, honored in their professional experience. As a parent, they may understand the decision more thoroughly. And so it's just our commitment to being really thoughtful about the impact of the process that we go through with budget next year. So it's still in draft form, and it may be modified, some of the language, but I just wanted to share with the board, this is work we're doing right now that we'll be using as we move forward with our work next year. So that's all I had for my report tonight. Just thought it was important. We had people here tonight sharing feedback around budget decisions that are being made. And I can tell you this type of process wasn't used as well as I believe it could have been, and would have had a different outcome for at least those affected by the decision. So this is something that we're going to hold ourselves accountable as we move forward.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Recognize that there are quite a few different budget decisions coming down and to be done in the year coming up. So our next item is Public and Community Affairs. And so, Dr. Holman, you can introduce.
Yes, and so at our last meeting, we let the board know that we would bring a little bit more thorough update around the outcome of the legislative session. And so tonight, Associate Superintendent Barbara Posthumus has a slide deck to just kind of walk through the legislative priorities and just some alignment around the positions that we were advocating for and the outcomes of some of those positions.
Okay, thank you.
Barbara, I'll hand it off to you.
All right, thank you very much. As Dr. Holman said, I'll be providing a legislative update tonight. the keyboard moved around. So the board adopted its priorities in November, and we had priorities in 4 main areas. And so we met with legislators before the session started, and the session began in January. I shared a presentation at the end of January to share these priorities and goals for the session. The legislation session ended April 23rd, so I'm going to share an update on how close our legislators took our priorities to heart and to see where they came in on that. So I took each of the, I'll just back up one, I took each of the priority sections, and I've got a few slides on each of these. So just to orientate you, because there's a lot of information on each slide, this is the special education priority area. The blue boxes are the board legislative priorities and requests. The bullets and text underneath kind of talks about what happened this session. The green check mark indicates some action in this area, some positive action in this area, and the red X indicates there was little or no action. So that's kind of, I'll be walking us through that. So our 3 areas of focus in special ed were to fully fund special ed programs and align funding with inclusionary practice. The legislature did increase the enrollment cap to calculate funding. They've been limiting districts to 13.5%. It's increased to 15%. Lake Washington currently has about 9.3% of special ed students. So that increase in the cap doesn't benefit us in funding. So the next area, however, does benefit Lake Washington. The legislature increased the funding factor to address costs of special ed programs or services. I'll show you on the next slide kind of our shortfall and our gap. They increase the multipliers for preschool and K-12, and so that will result in $2.8 million in additional revenue, or provides 13% of our current $22 million funding gap. The last thing we requested, the board requested, was to simplify and streamline the safety net process for high-cost student programs. They didn't make any significant changes to the safety net process, but they did lower the threshold, and that threshold is the dollar amount that they fund us. They set an amount, and then they will reimburse us above that amount. The challenge with that threshold is it's significantly above what we actually get funded. So there's a gap in between. So they've lowered that gap, but the end result is potentially about $45,000 to us. So it's a very small, the total gap for us is about $3 million because of that threshold. So this is the chart that we have shown you on. Lake Washington spends over $72 million of the district budget on special education, and the state and federal government only cover a portion of that. The blue part of the bar is the state funding, the green is federal funding, and the orange is local funding. So the prior year, the $22 million, the current year budget, 22-23 budget, there's a $22 million gap. So projecting into next year, we haven't finalized our budget. This is just a projection, but we know that costs will continue to increase. So next year, we believe our costs will be over $75 million because of state required COLAs and benefit increases. And so even with that new $2.8 million in funding, the shortfall will still, we anticipate, be over $20 million. So again, there's a significant gap between what the state funds and what the needs of our districts and students are. And so funding special education needs to be a high priority for our legislature. These are just some bills. I'm not going to go over every one, but these are bills we were keeping an eye on, and many we testified on. They were in three main areas: summer qualifications, increases in per pupil funding, and timing for safety net. The bill that passed, House Bill 1436, which was also incorporated in the apportionment or the budget, increased the multipliers, as I've already shared. The other bills did not pass. So our next area of focus was construction funding, and we had three main areas, none of which were addressed in this legislative session. So again, advancing the constitutional amendment for a simple majority. They've proposed, there's been bills in the 2019 session, the 2022 session, and the 2023 session. They've all failed to move. School construction, the state formula is artificially capped and woefully inadequate. Again, no changes to school construction funding. And then we asked to prioritize funding to promote sustainable design and construction in school buildings. No changes to funding priorities. There was a bill to delay the clean building performance standards that were passed in 2019 as they were not funded. Our district dedicated $4 million of our 2022 capital facilities levy to comply with those requirements. The other thing of note is Waukegan School District. That's in southern Washington, and I apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly.
Waukegan.
Thank you, John. Thank you. I didn't practice that. They sued the state, and because of relating to construction funding, the Supreme Court did hear that case in March, but we don't have a timeline for decision, so that will also potentially have an impact on construction funding. Capital construction bills that we were, again, focusing on in the areas of simple majority, the clean buildings, energy performance, construction plans, and accounting requirements, all failed except for Senate Bill 5403, which established an optional, school districts can have the option to establish a depreciation subfund for purposes of preventative maintenance. I think up to 2% of the general fund can be reserved for preventative maintenance. The third priority area was in transportation. Just a reminder, the state only funds about 85% of what it costs to transport our students, so leaving a gap at $2.3 million. The funding formula also is not transparent or predictable, and so we asked them to fully fund the cost and to update the transportation funding formula. And so both of the proposals that the Senate and House, they each had different versions. Both of those failed. They did, however, implement a safety net excess cost associated with transporting special passengers. We do not yet know if we're eligible. They had a safety net application this year. Next year, there will be more funds. We were not eligible for the funds this year. So the third area was regarding electric vehicles and providing infrastructure by 2030. The district has been applying for multiple state and federal grants. We've not been awarded grants due to the qualification criteria. The cost of purchasing electric vehicles significantly exceeds what the state currently provides. So there was a proposal to establish zero-emission grants, but it failed to advance. So the three bills relating to the funding formula, the zero emissions, and safety net all failed. So, and again, we were actively testifying on these, and unfortunately nothing moved forward. Okay, the last area of focus was under staffing, and again, three areas. To increase staffing allocations in the prototypical school model to reflect actual staff required to support school districts, increase the funding for substitutes, and adopt compensation recommendations that take into account staff costs and the impact on local levy funds. Just a reminder, Lake Washington School District hires over 190 CERT and classified staff that the state does not provide funding for. They only fund about 12% of the costs of substitute and leave costs, leaving a gap of over $6 million. When compensation changes are made at the state level, districts are impacted due to the funding gap between what they provide, what programs and services cost. For every 1% in state compensation, it costs the district $1 to $1.5 million local funding. The IPD that the legislature passed a 3.7% IPD for next fall, and that will cost us over $4.8 million in local funding. And our levy dollars are limited, so any impacts to local funding has to come from programs and services. So those are a continued challenge. You can see that most of those are X. There's a partial green check on the first one because the last legislative session, the legislature had a 3-year plan on the prototypical school model related to physical, social, and emotional support staff. They needed to continue to fund that in the biennium, and they did that. So this next slide kind of this is just a reminder of the blue box again on the left is dollars, and on the right is FTE. The blue box was the state funding level in 21-22. The orange box is the local levy funded. Again, 60% of the costs for our physical, social, and emotional support staff, which includes counselors, nurses, mental and behavioral health, and classified staff supporting staff and student safety, and our family engagement staff. So the funding level this year, we received a small increase, and then over the next 2 years, the funding level, that second blue line is where we expect the funding level. And just a reminder, our district is already spending the funds that the state is providing. So some staffing bills that we were closely following was in 4 areas: paraeducator training and assessment, our prototypical model compliance, contract renewal dates, and school administrators. So you can see that 2 have passed. They're House Bill 1015, which is about minimum employment requirements for paraeducators. The district supported additional flexibility, but we're analyzing the specific impact of the bill. And then Senate Bill 5175 is regarding contracts with school principals. And again, we're analyzing the impact of that. So, and then other bills that we were watching did not pass. So, and then finally, this is the last slide, just other bills that didn't fall into our legislative priority areas, but still things that impact us. One dual credit bill that failed, or 2 dual credit bill that failed, but 4 passed. And so House Bill 1316 allows high school students to take additional state-funded classes at Running Start. It increased the FTE from 1.2 to 1.4 that's allowed. Senate Bill 5048 provides state funding for public high school students enrolled in college and the high school courses to earn college credit. Previously, they had to pay for that college credit. Now it's state funded, so no cost to the student. 5072 mandates universal, highly capable screening for all students. Lake Washington was already doing some of this, but there's additional requirements. So this Senate Bill 5072 is a new unfunded mandate. They're not funding these costs. So the local cost of this could be upwards of $55,000 annually. And then the last bill, the 5243, mandates a common high school and beyond platform to be implemented in fall of '24. This was one we provided multiple times testimony on, and our testimony was around, we have already spent time and money implementing a platform, so we want to make sure we're closely involved in the state process. So it doesn't have all that time and effort go to waste. So
it's my understanding that Senate Bill 5243, that the implementation timeline is by October 24, not implementation by October 2024.
Okay, we'll clarify that, but
that's my
that could be. Okay. And that's the end.
All right, thank you. Any questions for? Seeing none, I can say thank you very much. Appreciate the overview of what has happened.
Thank you.
And Director Stewart, any additional?
We had some interesting developments this last week and a half. As we heard Governor Inslee say he was not going to be running for re-election, the dominoes fell, and Attorney General Bob Ferguson announced that he was going to be running for governor, which caused another domino to fall, and State Senator Monica Dinger at the meeting of the 45th last week announced she's going to run for Attorney General. That leaves the final Jeopardy answer as candidates for Monica Dinger's seat are. Haven't heard. I've been beating the bushes trying to see who is trying to line up. Haven't seen it yet. Maybe someone in this room. Who knows? That said, also at the same meeting, Monica Dinger wanted to highlight the accomplishments of the last legislative session, and she attempted to say that the better funding of special education was one of the crowning achievements. I pointed out to her that the gap was still there. I pointed out that they helped some districts that had the problem with the ceiling. But I said, we're still $20 million behind. And she acknowledged that we didn't get anything, basically. We can't have that. We can't have our state reps and state senators putting special needs off the table every time. They promised us last time, and they reneged. So keep that in mind as you pull the lever no, pardon me, you don't do a voting booth anymore. Don't pull the lever. As you mail in your ballot, okay?
All right, thank you. Any questions for Director Stewart? All right, with that, we are at board member and student rep comments, but they are not here, so board member comments. First, Director Carlson.
I just have a quick one. I already mentioned it to our superintendent and to Matt, but I wanted the rest of the DLT to hear this. For me, there was a huge difference between the panel conversation this evening and Barbara's presentation, and it is simply because I have never before in my life appreciated how much of an auditory learner I am not. Without the slides, I can't follow your story, and for better or for worse, the acoustics up here are terrible. So if you only tell me, I'm not really sure what you told me. If you show me and tell me, I will be able to follow your storyline. So just some feedback. Thank you.
Director Choi.
I just wanted to announce that our application for student representatives to the board will be going live this week. Exact date TBD, but look for the application to be posted this week, and I believe the communication will also be going out to our students. This year we are expanding the number of representatives that we are going to have, and so we are going to be taking applications to fill 2 student board representatives from the east side of the district and 2 from the west side of the district. So looking forward to seeing those applications and picking our...
Point of clarification, I think we are filling one. We have an existing
Have
student
one,
representative.
we will be filling, yes, 3 more, thank you.
I don't want Shivani to think we just fired her, so.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Glad to keep that moving, and excellent work in making that happen. Director Stewart.
it was very obvious tonight that we have some very strong sentiment that the cuts that we're making in the budget are too close to the classroom, too close to the students. And I would encourage us to look and revisit the staff of, or readjust as opposed to cuts, to revisit them and look at the impact on students, and to look and see where we have other areas that we might have not overlooked necessarily, but we need to revisit that maybe the priorities should be less impactful to the student in the classroom, which is apparent from tonight that it will be. Second point, I can appreciate the fact that people believe that when you put it on the website, oh, everybody's just waiting for you to read it. It's like billboards. Billboards are not the only method that people would communicate their messages in the years past. It was probably the most passive way to do it. If you didn't drive down that street, you didn't see the billboard. I would really recommend that we, in the future, concentrate on more proactive outreach of communications and messaging to the community, whether it's to the parents, whether it's to the teachers, whether it's to the students, whether it's to the media. It's even the idea of just sending out the emails. God knows, not all of them are read. Come on. If you're getting a flood of them, you're not going to read them. It would be great if we could somehow expand that to text messaging. I don't know if that's possible. But to depend upon one vehicle or two vehicles and it be a passive vehicle isn't communicating, it's just laying there. And I say that as a communications professional for the last 40 some odd years. Thank you.
I would like to ask, I know that there was a meeting with the city of Kirkland. So this is a quarterly meeting. Part of the request that I had was, as we had, I know that both, I believe, Director Choi and Director Liberty were able to attend. And so I was hoping just to get a quick summary. If not tonight, we can save it for May 22nd. That's fine. There's no rush.
No, let's try to do it tonight. I just need to refresh my recollection as to my...
Really, it's okay. We can just wait till May 22nd.
Dr. Choi, you want to...
My notes from that meeting are at home, so next time would be great.
All right, so just keep that for May 22nd, and if we can have that, that'd be fabulous.
I might be able to do it.
All right,
find
with
my
that,
notes.
I'm going to review the board meeting schedule. Sorry, it is now 10:30. We do have an executive board meeting scheduled on Wednesday at 6 p.m. And then we do, and that will be the only item on the agenda, and I don't have it written quite here specifically what it is. No.
I'm ready.
And then on May 22nd will be our next one, study session at 5 p.m. with the board meeting at 7 p.m. I will now entertain a motion to adjourn the May 8th, 2023 board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Director Liberty and seconded by Director Carlson to adjourn the board meeting at 10:28. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Excellent. Motion carries. The meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.